Hello and welcome to another episode of Reap the Spoils, a podcast the name of which brings very kingdoms to its knees. I'm Mark Sullivan.
I'm Delaila Lugo.
Jason Kwasnicki, you can notice right here rays of sunshine coming through the ceiling, heavenly light
Yeah,
on me.
if you're watching on YouTube, this is new. We're doing video for once. Hopefully this goes well and we can keep doing it because this is all new to me. This is very, very fresh. So hopefully it goes well. Hopefully you're happy. Hopefully you're excited to see our lovely, adoring faces. You probably see Delilah's all the time because you probably follow her streams and shit. So, I guess Jason and I are the most exciting thing about this, huh?
This reminds me of the days when Jason used to host.
It's true. He used to he figured out the video thing long before I did. But anyway, this is a podcast where we spoil things. Hence the name Reap the Spoils. We already played this game. We're gonna talk about it. We're gonna spoil the shit out of it.
That's right.
Jason, what game did we play that we're gonna talk about today?
We played NieR Replicant, or I believe some people call it Replicant. I don't know. I tried going down a rabbit hole, and it's just too much.
I'm pretty sure it's just Replicant.
Yeah.
It's just Replicant. Or NieR Gestalt.
Yes.
That's right. If you played the original NieR, this is still gonna apply. We're gonna have some new things to talk about in here, obviously. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the history section, but if you played the original back in 2010, we're gonna spoil some things that you haven't experienced unless you've played the most recent version. Really though, if you've also read Grimoire NieR, which I'll talk about a little bit, you'd probably know what we're going to be talking about anyway, because before a lot of that stuff was in the game, it was written in a bunch of novellas in a book. So you might be aware if you're a longtime fan. I know it's loaded. I will preface this by saying, yeah, there's a lot of novellas. Grimoire NieR exists. There's a lot of supplementary stories. I didn't have time to read that whole book, and the fact of the matter remains, that whole book's not in the game, and a lot of people aren't going to go seeking out the fan translation of Grimoire NieR. So, it's not expected that you've read that. We're probably not going to talk about a lot of it.
Not to mention that this game is a sequel to a game from an entirely different series.
Yeah, that's a whole nother can of worms. So I guess
will we potentially be spoiling NieR Automata, even though we did a whole spoiler cast on that?
Thank you. That's another thing I wanted to bring up. I don't want to bring up Automata.
Okay.
This is technically the first game. It's funny that even on the back of the box, it says the prequel to NieR Automata, but it's really NieR Automata came second. This did release before it, 7 years before Automata came out. It's just not a lot of people played this versus a lot more people played Automata, so they're kind of they're fun. It's funny that they're rebuilding this as a prequel.
And
really,
to be the connection between this and Automata really only applies to this version of the game.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, when we get to the section that is gonna be spoiling a little bit of Automata, I will give a warning. We'll try to keep those spoilers as brief and limited as possible. I really don't think it's going to be spoiling much. There's just some connections that I will talk about.
I'll probably end up bringing up generic things, nothing specific, no plot specific things. Yeah. But there are definitely comparisons to be made.
Right. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, with that out of the way, that being said, is it time for a history lesson?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Okay, I'll take that as a yes.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna try to keep again. I always try to keep these things brief. Sometimes it expands out further than I'd like it to. But okay, so we got a Drakengard game. We got 2 Drakengard games for the PS2. This game was originally intended to be the 3rd Drakengard game, which we did eventually get a Drakengard 3. I believe it came out in 2014, still for the PS3, even though the PS4 was out at that point. But this was intended to be the 3rd Drakengard game for the PlayStation 3, and it kind of evolved into a spin-off because it was kind of going in different directions and turned into its own thing. It kind of was,
You know why?
kind of was removed from the Drakengard world. And I'll talk about that after the history lesson a bit.
Do you know why though? It was a
Why?
business decision. What
Well,
game was coming out around, well, originally in the PS2 era, but what game came out under the Square Enix banner that was an action RPG that was very popular?
There were several games that came out.
What series that continues to this day?
You're talking about one or two things. I'm gonna guess Final Fantasy is what you're talking about.
No, action RPG. I'm specifically asking you, Mark.
Action RPG Square Enix. Oh man, now you're putting me on the spot.
Kingdom Hearts.
Oh.
Square Enix wanted another action RPG, but one that
was
targeted more towards the adult audience.
You know what's
because...
funny is I actually did kind of put that connection together. Is it bad that I forgot Kingdom Hearts is a Square Enix property?
I mean, you'd be forgiven. Like,
despite being a huge fan, for better or worse, of that franchise, I'm just like, fucking action RPG. What are you talking about?
Because basically, without going too much into it, the original Drakengard had a notoriety for delving into even darker themes than any of the NieR games go into. Yeah. So essentially, Square wanted, as opposed to Kingdom Hearts, which was obviously it's a fucking Disney game. Walt Disney / Final Fantasy, but
the game that stars Donald Duck and Goofy is a Disney game.
Yeah.
But Square, when they decided they were going to do Drakengard 3, they were looking at the success of Kingdom Hearts, and they said, "All right, let's get one of these, but targeted towards a more adult audience."
Well, it evolved into a spin-off series, for reasons we'll kind of get into. Development lasted about 3 years, and only, I want to say, one of those years was like pre-production stuff. 2 years of actual development, and I found this interesting. It was initially an Xbox 360 exclusive, and then that changed. They made the decision to bring it to both PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360.
Because there were only like 100 Xbox 360s in all of Japan.
Yeah, well, sold through, yeah, for sure. And then there's the whole situation with bringing it west, and how the decision was made to. So let me back up a little bit. So the 360 version is, in Japan, mind you, is NieR Gestalt. The PS3 version is NieR Replicant. And the big difference between the two of those is, in Gestalt you play as an adult NieR, and in Replicant you play as a young boy NieR.
Papa NieR and Brother NieR.
Papa NieR and Brother NieR.
And I have questions about that because I've only played Replicant.
Well, it was purely a business decision because
they didn't think that
Americans wanted to see a young boy.
Yeah, they didn't think that a game focused around you playing as a young, pretty boy protagonist would sell well in the West.
That was the opposite perception of like Kojima when he created Raiden.
Yeah. Pretty much. So we got big muscly arms, Papa NieR, for both 360 and PS3 here. It wasn't called NieR Gestalt. It wasn't called NieR Replicant. It was just called NieR. Got a whole new logo and everything, and the cover art made it look like a lot edgier than it probably needed to be. Probably really was. It's so funny looking at that cover art and you see Papa NieR looking all like angry and badass, and then you play the game and he goes up to Kaine. He's like, "Kaine, we're friends now." And it's just like the dichotomy of that is just like, man, you guys really needed to sell this game here, and made some funny decisions to do it. But anyway, another thing that I wanted to bring up, kind of an inspiration that Yoko Taro has said that really inspired this game, really the whole crux of the theme of the game. This is so weird and interesting and bleak. 9/11 really inspired the story of this game, because to Yoko Taro, he wanted to show a story where both sides of a conflict felt that they were justified. and that is the overall that's the overall theme that he wanted to bring into this game, which I thought was really interesting. And obviously we'll get into that as to what he means by that, especially when we talk about well, obviously the first route, and then the second route when you go through half the game again, and the new things that you learn and are given as a player. So yeah, NieR came out in the West, or at least in North America, on April 27th, 2010. And got mediocre reviews, mediocre reception, you know?
I think I got like a 7 from IGN, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot to that, you know, and I'll talk about this more when we talk about the original versus the remaster, because you guys played the remaster, right? Because it's easy to play now, it's easy to get, it just came out. A lot more people that have played Automata, loved Automata, are now itching to play the first one. It's now readily accessible, they're playing it. So yeah, it came out in 2010. We got the remaster Replicant version 1.22. It's 1.5, or it's the square root of 1.5. That's the number that Yoko Taro was going for with that name.
Great.
Yeah, we're just gonna call it NieR Replicant from here on out. Got a remaster that was released this year, April 23rd, 2021. So just under 11 years later. And yeah, that's really what I got for the history lesson on NieR.
Excellent.
Are we ready to jump in a little bit?
Do it.
Actually, I have one more history lesson to give. I almost forgot. Sorry. Because now we got to go over the Drakengard connection.
Oh.
Which NieR was eventually getting, hard to get because it was a PS3 game. It only released on the PS3. It didn't sell very well. It wasn't very popular. Drakengard is even older and even less popular, I'd say, at least by today's standards.
It's a very niche following.
Yeah. Like Jason said, Drakengard had some very, very dark stuff in it.
It's a game about a sociopath and involves incest. It goes places.
Yeah. It takes place in a different world, whereas I guess starting with some spoilers here. Again, I didn't say this at the top of the show. I usually always give this warning. If you've not played this game, please don't keep listening. I want you to stop now. I want you to go play the game, and then I want you to come back, because this game especially is just, to me, it's like so special and it's so unique. Just like I said for Automata, I'm saying it here again. Please go play this game especially and come back and listen, because you would be depriving yourself of such a special experience to listen to us jab about it for about 3 hours, because I have a feeling that's roughly how long this is going to take.
So feel like you wouldn't be able to wrap your head around what we're jabbing about unless you play it.
For fucking real. All right.
Also, I feel like real quick, we should just mention, for the next, like, I don't know, minute or two, we'll be spoiling Drakengard.
Yeah.
The last ending. Yeah,
that's what I'm about to get into, and statute of limitations on that game especially is up. And I haven't even played it, unfortunately. You have to know a lot about a specific ending in Drakengard to know where NieR is coming from. So Drakengard's ending E, the 5th ending, is what we're going to be spoiling. I'm not going to go into anything else with Drakengard other than this. So basically what happens in ending E, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. The main character, Keiichi, and his dragon come through a portal chasing a villain in Drakengard into modern-day Tokyo. Keep in mind, this game released 2002, roughly. Sometime in the early 2000s. Comes through a portal chasing a villain into modern-day Tokyo. They defeat the villain, and then they are shot down by the Japanese Air Force with missiles. It sounds basically really like goofy.
It's basically like a giant kaiju boss fight.
I was thinking like Godzilla, exactly.
It sounds really silly, but it is like a very serious thing, and
it's serious, but silly.
It's serious. serious fucking business here with Drakengard.
It gets even more wacky when you consider, like, Drakengard's world is essentially an alternate dimension Earth. It's literally Europe flipped upside down.
Yeah.
It's
so
Yeah.
What this does, what happens, the dragon becomes salt. It becomes salt. That salt kind of releases into the atmosphere, and it starts. The first thing that this does, that this whole event does, is it introduces Maso, which is Drakengard's like form of like something that provides magic. It introduces it to the real world, our world, so to speak. And then it also the dragon saltifying and then releasing that salt into the atmosphere, it starts causing something called white chlorination syndrome, which is either turning people into these salt monsters called Legion, or they're just becoming straight up salt statues and just outright just killing them,
Dead.
basically. Yeah. That's kind of all you really need to know to then get into NieR Replicant / Gestalt. That's really what we need to know.
Oh,
would you agree with that, Jason? There's nothing else I missed that you feel is pertinent?
Yeah, I think everything else is pretty much explained, like the pact that people make and all the Gestalt stuff. Yeah.
Well, I guess we can jump right into. There's something I actually left off in the notes, and I think we should talk about it. We should talk about the prologue before we talk about anything else, because it's a very disconnected section of the game that doesn't really get context until much later. So I guess let's talk about that first. And
with NieR and Yona.
Yeah.
And honestly, you don't even get the real full context of it unless you know what we just talked about.
Yeah, really, that's true. Because it seems like so let's back up. The song that's playing in that prologue actually is called Snow and Summer. So that kind of informs us that it's an odd time for it to be like cold and seemingly snowing. That's not snow that's falling, that's salt. That's an important detail to understand. But we see this young boy and this young girl, and they're hiding out. And keep in mind, we're talking about Replicant here, so young boy versus Papa. We'll talk about Papa later, I'm sure. Young boy, young girl in an abandoned convenience store, and they're both hungry. These creepy monsters show up. You grab a pipe and you go whack them a bunch, and you get beat up by them. NieR, or the young boy, I should say, tells the young girl, "Don't touch that book, whatever you do." And you'd think that he would follow his own advice. He doesn't. He touches the book, and then a big ass Bayonetta demon arm comes out and punches the monster out of the convenience store. Which was a pretty cool introduction to how the magic system worked and just the basic combat of the game. Because as you were fighting the monsters outside, like you start leveling up rapidly and getting new powers, and it's introducing you to a lot in pretty quick succession.
It was a cool little tutorial section, but I was like, throughout the game, I'm like, okay, when are we gonna go back to this? I was so confused.
Yeah. And when it ends you finding out that the young girl touched the book, and young boy is really upset, and it's all bleak and sad. Director Yoko Taro pops up on screen, and then it says 1,412 years later, and we're in like a totally different setting, and we're a young boy that looks really similar to that young boy before, and there's a young girl that looks really similar to that young girl before.
Yeah.
Yep.
What's going on? What's happening? It's crazy ass shit, right? So I guess let's just go ahead and jump into, and we're gonna double back to that prologue as we talk about this stuff, because it does get explained through some of these endings. But I guess if you're listening to this again, I hope you've played the game and have all these endings in your mind.
I feel like it should also be noted, excuse me, having played NieR Automata probably provided me with it, and I don't know, you could probably speak to it as well, Delaila and Mark, probably provided us with a little bit of a different experience with jumping from that prologue to to the main game, like because you kind of know, you have an idea of generally what is happening. You understand that there was some kind of calamity, and it's a post-apocalyptic future. I wonder what it would have been like to go back and play the game originally without all of that knowledge under your belt.
Well, I think again, we're not spoiling Automata. I'm not going to say like a lot of the big reveals that happened in that game, but I feel like each one of these games spoils the other pretty significantly, right? Like I feel like a lot of big reveals in Automata aren't as big. Like they were huge for me and you guys because we hadn't played this game first. And then going to this game, I felt like the reveals were still pretty big, but like you kind of know where it's going, obviously. Whereas if we had played this game back when it came out or before we had played Automata, there's some big reveals in Automata that just wouldn't have been as big and wouldn't have been as surprising.
Right.
That's true.
A friend of mine, shout out to Eric, he listened to the show. He played this game first, so he's playing through Automata, and like some of the reveals that he's getting to are like, well, I mean, yeah, I kind of expected that, and I'm like, yeah, I don't really blame you, you know.
Right.
But I'm not gonna talk about those big reveals that happen in Automata because obviously, if you haven't played that game, you wanted to play this game first, which I highly encourage you to go play Automata if you played and enjoyed this game and you haven't played it yet.
To support that point though, without spoiling anything, just being general, is that in Automata I had this perception of Devola and Popola that was put into perspective in this game that it seemed completely different. But it's the same story, but I just read into it differently.
Right.
And we'll get into that when we get into like characters and endings.
Yeah. Well,
and stuff.
I mean, hey, let's go ahead and talk about because we're here to talk about. We're here to spoil the game, you know. If you played the game, I hope you played the game if you're listening. So we're gonna talk about. I kind of grouped the endings together, A and B, because fundamentally they're kind of the same ending, just like different sides of that coin.
Yeah, the playthroughs they basically just add in bits to give you more context for things, but it's essentially the same. It's kind of like this is another one of those comparisons with Automata where the first two playthroughs are essentially the same. It's just
a different perspective,
adding different context. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess I hate to start this off with a complaint, but I really feel like the structure of this game really weakens it. The fact that you do have to play through it, I mean, you technically only have to play through the second half of the game about 3 times. You can do the 4th time, I did, but there's a way you can kind of get around doing that and just do it 3 times. But that kind of leaves you exhausted by the end.
I agree. I much prefer how Automata. Yes, there are those first 2 playthroughs that are almost identical with a few exceptions. But after that, you're basically just continuing a story and it's different each time. Versus this where you start knowing inside out. It gets to a point where I was just kind of running past enemies and
yeah.
Go ahead, Delaila.
I think for Automata, its gameplay was woven into the story. So like as you're playing the game, you're playing differently, you're experiencing a different perspective, whereas in NieR Replicant, you're playing as the same character the whole time until Rui, and you have the same like move set. There's no like hacking all of a sudden, and you're getting to know a perspective like of the shades, right? That could have maybe just been offered in cutscenes instead of making us go back to these 5 locations over and over and over again. And we still could have gotten the point, I feel.
Yeah. All right. I don't want to spend too much time. I don't want to spend any time dunking on this game versus Automata. But I understand like why we kind of have to do it because Automata did improve on the structure a lot.
And I feel like this game does do things better than Automata. And we'll get to those. Yeah,
absolutely it does. But again, I don't want to spend too much time like comparing this to Automata. But I do want to bring up the structure and how it can be really tiring to get through all those playthroughs in quick succession to experience the story. It's also kind of why a little inside baseball, kind of why this episode took us a little longer. You know, we were originally planning to do this episode for May, and obviously that didn't happen.
Right. This game took us longer than we had expected.
Yeah.
to finish.
Yeah.
I should note though that the repetition does have a thematic purpose in terms of what's going on, because essentially he there's a cycle where he's over and over again has to go through and save Yona. That's kind of a point, and they make a point of it in the story to ask what is the purpose of this, and
Yeah.
that does play into the theme. So there is a reason for it.
So let's talk about let's talk about the ending sequence as a whole. Well, actually, you know what? Let's talk about the midpoint of the game. The point that kind of it's a huge left turn, sharp left turn for this game. Because the first half is pretty generic JRPG stuff, right? You're going town to town. Oh, I need this done. Can you help me? Oh, sure. And you go and help them, and you meet interesting characters. You accumulate party members, until your village gets attacked, and NieR gets. By the way, you can name your main character. His canonical name is NieR. That's how we're going to be referring to him. So if you decided to name yours
No, it's not. It's
Bloodhead,
Jay.
Jessica.
No, it's Jay.
we all chose drastically different directions on that.
No, I named him NieR, but I think because it says, well, choose your name, like, what's your name? It says, what is your name? So if you put like your own name and you're like a girl, and then NieR actually has a girl name, it's kind of funny.
We're going with NieR. So
Yes.
NieR, you're fighting this giant ass shade that's attacking your town. NieR gets like ganked in the chest by a figure that looks remarkably like him.
Yeah.
And that would be what the game refers to as the Shadow Lord. Which is very
they were very creative with although I think that was supposed to be the point. It was supposed to be very fairy tale-ish.
Yeah. And yeah, it's a very like I said, it's a very sharp left turn. Your party member Emil has to petrify Kaine to this door to make sure this giant shade can't get out. And well, I guess when you guys got to this point, how was it an emotional section for you guys? Did you were you upset by that point? Because we hadn't had like a ton of time with those characters. Kaine more so than Emil, I'd say. And then there's also the whole all the stuff going on with Vice and Grimoire Noir. So did it affect you guys in any way getting to that section?
I felt
No.
like I felt like that's where the game really started.
Okay, I think that's a great assessment.
Like, because up until then, I was kind of like, I did a lot of side quests, not all of them, not even like, I mean, I only did like, I think around 60% of them. It was, but like you said, it was a lot of fetch quests. And like you said, it felt like pretty standard JRPG fare up until that point, without kind of the really solid writing. I was actually surprised because of Autotoma and how well I thought that was written. I was surprised at kind of how relaxed and generic it felt, and then it kind of takes that turn, and then going forward, it really starts to build up. Yeah, I felt like that was kind of where the game begins.
Yeah, and even not knowing anything that happens after, at this point, you don't know much about Kaine. You know that you helped her kill a shade that was her grandmother, but you don't understand the relationship between her and her grandmother at this point. And I feel like there wasn't even much interaction between her and NieR at that point for me to have felt like, oh my god, no, Kaine, like, why'd you go? Like, I liked her as a character, but I didn't really know her. Now, had it been Weissy, Grimoire Weiss, I was connected to him at that point. So that would have been more heartfelt. But even Emil, we had just met him in the manor, like, right
you have
before
a lot
that.
more. Yeah, you have a lot more dialogue with Weiss at that point in the game.
Yeah, because he's pretty much been your companion since basically since the start. You get him very early on. Kaine, you get about halfway through that first half. But they it's not like they spend a ton of time talking and bonding. It's really in that second half of the game when her and Emil are having more idle chatter, you start to get to know the characters, and you also start to like them more.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that Yona being kidnapped. I did feel a little bit there, more so than what happened to, Kaine and Emil. I did because I like the general setup of, it's like I said before, they wanted that fairy tale setup. Big brother has to save his little sister who's sick with some mysterious black plague disease. And I do like that they kind of hit you at that midpoint that, okay, you not only did you fail saving her from the disease, but some mysterious shadow lord comes and kidnaps her. I did feel like that's kind of a cool place to, because we're essentially going to consider this the start of the story, because from here on out, that's where you pick up, is right immediately after this, in all your subsequent playthroughs.
And it's interesting when you consider like both halves of the game, the first half and the second half, they're both kind of fetch quests, like as a whole. The first half of the game, you're kind of told by Devil and Popola about this song, the Song of the Ancients, and Grimoire Vice recognizes it, and you're kind of given this idea that if you get Vice these sealed verses, right? Because you hitting him on the head made him have a little bit of a spot of amnesia. He doesn't really remember much about who he is and what's going on. Um, or you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You have to go and get these sealed verses, and according to the song, quote unquote, that can maybe help, that can do anything, right? That's the ultimate magical power that could maybe cure the black scroll, which Yona has.
Mhm.
So and that's what NieR's desperate for, he doesn't care, he doesn't want anything else, he just wants to save Yona.
Yeah.
And Vice, he doesn't know, so he's like, oh, I'll go along with it, like that might work. So they go and they go and collect these sealed verses. And then this is a big turning point where you've collected them all, and there's this other book that looks a lot like Vice that's like, you're supposed to join with me and we'll bring the world to a new paradise.
Right.
And there's so much that's kind of dumped into that scene and into that sequence that just leaves you questioning, what's going on? Who's the Shadow Lord? Why does he look so much like NieR? What is Grimoire Noir? What does he want with Vice? And it's I don't know. I felt really emotional. I was getting more and more attached to Kaine at the time. So for her to basically sacrifice herself to make sure everyone would be safe, like to me, it was emotional. It was a good part of her character, for that point in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on into the second half of the game, I just kind of want to talk about the first part, the part that you play only once, which is in that first playthrough, going to the manor and the transformation of Emil, so that he can get the magic that will supposedly save Kaine. How about that scene with Emil's transformation kind of being absorbed and combining with his sister, to become what we know and love Emil as today?
Yeah, I think seeing it was very emotional for me. Well, not very, but like more emotional than Kaine's being petrified.
Delaila, I will remind you, you have a full playthrough of this game up
Yeah,
on YouTube, so
you can see all my reactions.
we could see all your reactions. So you can't lie. Like you have to be honest.
Yeah, as a whole, there was no point in this game where I cried at all. But there were moments where I was like, "Damn, that's really sad." And most of the time, I was like, "What is happening?" But yeah, Emil, just seeing an innocent kid, right, and his innocent sister having to go through this project and this experimentation, and then him kind of turning into something that he feels ashamed of, was just sad in of itself. Like, I feel like a lot of kids could kind of identify with that without turning into like this giant head that Yoko Taro wears all the time.
Yeah,
it's essentially like if a 10-year-old was put into the Weapon X program and became Wolverine, like. But yeah, no, I again, Emil probably my favorite character in this story. And I really love those scenes. I love learning more context to Emil's backstory and his power, because I found that mansion section in the first half interesting, But I wanted to know more. It was kind of like, okay, why can't he just take this blindfold off and petrify people and shoot laser? Why is he like fucking Cyclops? Like, what's going on here? And speaking of Weapon X program, another X-Men reference,
really.
but I didn't even mean to do that. But no, but the backstory with his sister in this experimental program with the children, as that slowly starts to come back.
And I
oh,
no,
go
go
ahead.
Finish.
All I was gonna say was that, and at the end of the sequence, when he's transformed and the reaction that you get from NieR and Emil's reaction to NieR's reaction was very heartfelt, and I felt a great character moment.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
we'll delve more into the characters individually later for sure, because there's a lot. There's more to unpack with the characters in this game. I feel, well, really, there's still a lot to unpack with the story here, but the characters are really a big focus of this game.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the other thing I'll add is there's a one of those text stories, the one that fleshes out Emil's backstory. That's actually new and incorporated into this game, or
Mm-hmm.
this version of the game that wasn't in the original. I believe that was one of the memoirs in Grimoire NieR.
Mm.
So I really like that they started incorporating more of that stuff into this remaster, because they give so much backstory and really flesh out a lot of these characters that you don't really like spend as much time with as you would have, as you would like, or you should really, to for them to be meaningful, just in the game itself, right?
I will say one thing about those like really long um, text entries that you're going through. I fucking hated those. I wish they
Same.
just made little
We'll
cutscene. Like
we'll we'll
you're playing a video game. Like, come on.
we'll talk about those later more.
Yeah.
And I'm specifically talking about the text adventure ones where you actually have to make choices.
Oh yeah,
I'm
I
not
know.
talking about those.
I know you're talking. Oh, okay.
I'm talking about the ones where it's like,
It's just text.
yeah, it's just text that you're reading the backgrounds of these characters. Like,
It's funny because they're basically like visual novels, except there's no visual.
that's what I'm saying is
Yeah.
you're in a visual and interactive medium, and you're making me read text.
Well,
Like I could go read a book.
I don't think there's anything wrong with reading a lot of text, but even still images behind in some of those, which they did incorporate in some, if I recall, it would have gone a long way.
Yeah, it was just like a black screen though, and it really
Yeah.
peeved me.
Yeah.
Well, the last thing I want to bring up before we really go into the endings, we need to move along on the endings.
Mm-hmm.
We got 5 to cover. I wanted to talk just a little bit about something in the original release for North America, or Gestalt versus Replicant. When you do save Kaine, Emil gets the power to free her from petrification, and after she wakes up, it's really funny what she says to Brother NieR versus what she says to Papa.
Hmm.
When she wakes up for Brother NieR, it's like, wow, you grew up.
Yeah.
What
Her
she says
eyes get all big.
yeah. What she says to Papa NieR is, you look like shit.
That's hysterical.
Really funny. And like the way they handle it, because that's a 5-year time jump, the way they handle it and kind of differentiate, it's a lot more obvious with Brother NieR, right? Because he's a
Right.
younger boy, and you can grow a lot when you're young in 5 years. Surprise, surprise. When you're a kid and 5 years later, you're not so much a kid anymore. So he looks much older. He's obviously grown
What was
over
it, like
time.
16 to 21 or something like that?
So I don't actually remember.
Or what was the jump for Papa NieR then?
Papa NieR, the way they change it, because he's in like his mid-30s.
He gets like an eye patch and shit,
He
right?
gets like they put like an eye patch thing on him, and they just make him look a little more grizzled.
Interesting.
Yeah, so so Kaine wakes up and she's just like, you look like shit.
So,
Really
because
funny.
at this point of the game, I felt like it was a really epic, cool, but like stereotypical anime moment when NieR comes back as an adult. He has like the cool white spiky hair and the big like Buster Sword looking thing, and he just looks really cool. How did that play out with Papa NieR? Like, was it?
It's the exact same thing. So the reason, like, if you played the original or if you played Replicant, the reason why, like, it's kind of just both in the spoiler cast is, like, there is no difference between the two games, right? It's like
Okay.
either your Papa NieR and Yona's your daughter, or your brother NieR and Yona's your sister. Everything else is basically the same. All the
Yeah.
conversations with Weiss are the same. It's just what I find interesting is that they all work really well. If it's Papa NieR, it just seems like two old men bickering back and forth to each other. If it's
Right.
Brother NieR, it's like Weiss is kind of like a mentor or like a chaperone, and kind of just like they're like he's come like NieR. He's kind of teaching NieR like the ways of the world or whatever. The conversations always work no matter what. It's really interesting how they made that work from a writing perspective and from a script
Yeah. And
perspective.
was it as impactful though, seeing him like with the eye patch, or like did he look as cool as like NieR looked
I mean,
becoming an
the thing
adult?
about Papa NieR, the thing about the original game in general, even if you look at how Brother NieR looked back then, they look very weird. Like
Hmm.
Papa NieR, there's a reason a lot of people make fun of like Papa NieR and call him like Golem because he looks like a rock man. His design is just very strange. But
Gotcha.
He looks like Conan with gray hair.
actually not a terrible comparison. Um, I do think that the father-daughter relationship works better than the brother-sister one,
Hmm.
Yeah,
but
that makes sense. That's just like general
yeah,
storytelling. A father-daughter relationship is always just gonna. It's a primal thing. It's always gonna come
yeah.
across stronger.
But when it comes to the relationship with the party members, Brother NieR is so much better because I cannot tell you how awkward and funny it is in the scene after in the area after you beat Hook the second time and he's fully dead and you go to Kaine um and wake her up and like you're trying to get her to come with you. It makes so much more sense for a young boy than it does for a 30, 40 some odd year old man to go, Kaine, we're friends now. It's
Yeah.
so strange.
Okay, that helps.
That
Those are all the questions I had.
And that's
that
kind of like
and later on when it's kind of, I guess we'll talk about it when we get to it, but when it's
yeah.
implied that Emil might have feelings for
Oh,
NieR.
that's not, and that's like 100% confirmed.
Oh, is
And
it?
that's
I didn't know
oh
that.
oh yeah, and we'll talk about that when we talk about Emil as a character. Same thing with Kaine because there's a lot. Like I said, there's a lot to talk about with both of those characters. Um, but yeah, that's really where the Kingdom Hearts ness of the game really started to rear its head. Was this whole the whole apparent like need for or the apparent theme of friendship between these party members
Right.
um and just like Kaine, we're friends now. Yeah, this game really is adult Kingdom Hearts,
Yeah.
Hmm.
for better or worse. I for better in my opinion. But anyway, let's jump forward and let's talk about both endings A and B because the routes are very different but the endings are very very similar.
Hmm.
um and we'll start from entering the Shadow Lord's castle, right? You get into this strange looking garden and you have to answer this bird's riddles or questions. Really, they're just questions, and you kind of don't. There's nothing that indicates what the answers are. You kind of just have to piece them together yourself.
Based on the
And
world that you've gotten to know.
yeah, and it's like not even overtly clear like what the answers are. But it's like what what's going on with humanity? It's a black disease or whatever the questions were. I don't remember them off the top of my head. But you go in, that unlocks the door, and you go into the door. And keep in mind, the entire game you've been getting support from Devil and Popola, and you walk in, and they're there to stop you.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like, well, you helped us get here. Why are you stopping us?
Mhm.
And
Again,
they're
that's another thing that if you played Automata, I'm sorry,
yeah, I
you kind of already, yeah.
right. And I don't want to say anything more than that. Um,
So I wasn't really surprised by that.
right. It wasn't surprising to me either. But like I yeah, I don't want to say any more than that. Sorry if you haven't played Automata.
Which is why I
Yeah.
would recommend, obviously, if you're listening, I would recommend to stop listening and go play. But I would recommend playing this before playing Automata.
Yes. Well, I do agree with that. but Devil and Poplar are there to stop you. And like that first boss fight, you don't learn much other than they're now seemingly antagonists. When you get to the second instance with them, that's where it really, you really learn a lot.
Well, you also know that they feel betrayed by Weiss, but you don't understand why completely at that point.
And they do something to Weiss, and they don't rip his powers away, but they kind of take them back, right?
Yeah.
That's how they put it. Like they're taking back what's theirs. He just kind of borrowed them. And then there's the sequence, you go into the ballroom, and you don't learn much about that until you do Route B. You go up further into the castle, and you have to fight Devil and Popola again. And there's also a very emotional. Oh yeah, I guess I'll just ask you guys up front about this. How did you feel about the King of Facade jumping in and saving the day?
Oh, dude, he was definitely my favorite side character.
Yeah,
like outside of the main party, like
well, I wouldn't consider any of the main party side characters. You know, those are main characters.
Yeah. I'm more meant just to differentiate characters that aren't NieR, but no, I loved his entire story, both him and Fira, right? Fira, yeah. I loved that arc, both. Because both his growth, but how his growth and how that growth impacts the world is very much representative of that theme that you were talking about earlier that Yoko Taro wanted to encapsulate with this game.
Yeah.
And he just goes out like a badass motherfucker. Like,
yeah,
that's all I can say.
Yeah, the Facade arc was definitely the most fleshed out. I feel like I felt more connected to Fira and the prince more so than like the brothers at the Junk Heap and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I would also say that the Facade, the whole Facade storyline, and we'll talk about the story. I do want to talk about the storylines probably after we get through the first 4 endings.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt like the Facade storyline was probably the most emotionally impactful.
Yeah, 100%. So him coming through and saving the day was like, yeah, the homie. But I also felt bad that like he potentially sacrificed himself because he was fighting an invulnerable enemy, you know?
Yeah. And they also get the best characterization, just the citizens of Facade with all the rules and the way they talk, and they're talking in Japanese, right? They just didn't bother. It's not Japanese.
It's not. No. So I actually looked it up around when we were playing because I was curious. I believe it's a bunch of it's similar to how Emmy Evans like created the I believe it's called the Chaos language for the soundtrack. It's just a bunch. It's a bunch of Japanese syllables, but mismatched and just flipped around.
Okay.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense given they also came up with like a language for the shades that's supposed to be like in a vault. That was something, a theme that kind of runs throughout the game, is like language, because obviously again that ties back into the idea of perspective, and perspective is affected by language, culture, all that kind of stuff.
So, according to this user on Tumblr, something very special, which is a NieR dedicated Tumblr, the Facade language was actually constructed by taking various katakana figures, one of the Japanese alphabets, and jumbling them up. All of the syllables are there, but they've been shoved together in a completely nonsensical way.
Wow.
So that's why it sounds like Japanese.
Sounded just like Japanese. Yeah. I could have sworn I made out some words from watching anime, but there goes what I know.
And it's the same both in the English and Japanese dub. It's the same voice actors, the same exact language. It's no different because it's all to both languages. It's complete gibberish.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't have to change it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's like something really interesting about the world. Go ahead, Delaila.
Even the moment right before when you're in the ballroom, just seeing like those like ethereal figures dancing and then the shades come out. That was the first moment that I felt. Damn, I'm trying not to compare it, but that I felt what I felt in NieR Automata with the carnival scene. What is it? The amusement park. That's when I was like, huh, like what's going on here? And then later, and we'll talk about it. We'll get, there's some context there.
That is come to think of it, that ballroom when you first go in there and you see
I
those serial
didn't
figures,
put that together. Yeah,
it's a huge hint about the truth about what's going on in that game. Obviously, we're about to find out what the truth is. Replicants aren't, or NieR and everyone, that they're not humans. They're replicants.
Yeah.
What the hell does that mean? The game doesn't really tell you very well.
It doesn't.
Yeah, that's true. I just assumed from Automata that we're playing as androids, which isn't too far from the truth.
So what we do, I'll kind of try to just dumb it down and explain it as quickly as possible, because I don't want to spend too much time just spitting out exposition on what's going on here.
Before you do, I just want to say the only clues that I actually had to what replicants were versus androids is the questions. Like once I got all the answers correct, the questions kind of give you some insight into what a replicant is, like the soul going into a shell kind of thing.
Yeah.
So and that's kind of the thing, right? Is like we're given no indication of what's going on prior, really, at all. And then you get those questions, and when you find out what the answers are, you're like, huh?
And it doesn't spend any time. It doesn't there's no downbeat to it. Like immediately you just start going into a next boss fight and you keep going.
Because what happens is the Devil and Popola they shoot the knowledge back into Vice so that he remembers, and you find out that Devil and Popola are androids, and that your party, with the exception of Emil, because Emil is kind of a special case, your party isn't human; they're replicants. And you get some notes. You get some notes that you can go and read through, and they're kind of notes written from a long time ago, kind of explaining like what's going on. And basically, what's been going on is because of white chlorination syndrome. And keep in mind, remember, the beginning of the game, the prologue is like 2050, I think. Like around that time, maybe 2052, something like that. That's when that prologue takes place. This is when the prologue kind of comes back in. White chlorination syndrome is like wiping out the human race. People are dying left and right. And what humanity had figured out and found out how to do using the Maso that was introduced from the entrance of Keim, and I believe that the dragon's name was Angelus. What they figured out how to do is to use that Maso to separate the body and the soul, because the bodies are deteriorating. And once white chlorination syndrome went away, they were going to rejoin the soul to essentially a clone, which is called a replicant. And that would enable humanity to continue to exist, right? The problem, since we are playing as replicants this whole time, is they became sentient. Developed their own personalities. Replicant NieR became his own person. Replicant Kaine became her own person. And when the souls, they're called Gestalts, spend so much time apart, they start to go berserk, right? And the first example of that is the Shadow Lord. And what the game doesn't really tell you very well, which I think is a big problem. I had to do a lot of reading, watching videos, and learning how to fully understand the story of this game. The Shadow Lord NieR, the original NieR, is the original Gestalt. He was in that prologue. In order to save Yona, a lot of people were getting gestaltized, and it was failing. And he was the first one to kind of be successful. And that kind of and this was all done and accomplished through these grimoires. There's like I think Yoko Taro wanted to have 13 different grimoires. We only saw 3 in the game. Vice, obviously, Noir, obviously, and then there was the boss fight against Rubrum, which was also supposed to be kind of a hint at things about things that are going on when you fight Grimoire Rubrum in the Emil's Manor.
The manor.
And there's an interesting novella. Obviously, it's not in the game, so I'm not going to go too into it. This is why I really want somebody to actually officially localize and release Grimoire NieR here, because currently the only way to read it is a fan translate. The only way to read it in English is a fan translation. It's in a Google Doc that's out there. Maybe I'll put it in the comments of the video in case anyone wants to delve into it. But there's like a lot of interesting backstories that go into the history of those books. It's really, really cool stuff. But anyway, those books were the reason that the body was able to be separated from the soul, and the reason why Noir was trying to rejoin with Vice was because that would trigger the end of Project Gestalt. That would trigger the Gestalt and the replicant joining together to then become one. And the Shadow Lord was kind of on a time crunch. He was kind of going berserk. He wanted his body. The reason he kidnapped Yona was for the same reason basically that Replicant NieR has been trying to save her. They're both suffering.
Yeah.
Right.
And what the game also doesn't really tell you about the Black Scroll, I feel like I'm talking a lot. I'm really sorry.
No,
you explain it. I don't want to break your flow because I know it's a lot to explain.
It's a lot. It's really a lot, and the game doesn't really explain it very well. So I'm trying to get through this so that we can all talk about the endings.
Yeah.
What the Black Scroll is a replicant basically going through what do they call it? It's relapsing, right? It like the body is seeking the soul, but the soul is not there, and that consciousness is kind of taking over. What was the other thing? Oh, an interesting detail that I found out, I believe from watching this YouTuber Klemps. He did an analysis of the game. Really interesting stuff. I recommend it. The angelic runes that appear on the body from the Black Scroll, they're actually they're angelic runes, so they represent letters. The letters they represent are the 4 letters in the sequence of DNA.
Oh,
which I found really fucking fascinating.
That's really cool.
If it's something that anyone can catch before they get to the end reveal, obviously it has like big important connotations.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay.
So
I think
Project Gestalt was created to save humanity.
Right.
But they had to wait for the white coronation syndrome to go away before that project could be complete.
Yeah.
But there were too many but because Grimoire Weiss lost his memory and now regained it but still decided to side with NieR, who's his homie at this point.
It's the power of friendship, baby.
The power of friendship destroyed humanity. There you go.
Yeah.
Basically. Be friends with a book, not a human.
Books make the best friends. This is really this is secretly just a thing to get you to read more, guys. Just that's what this is all about. Yeah, basically. And Devil and Popola are androids that were made to facilitate this project's success.
Right.
And another thing that I had to look up, again, it's not really explained very well. This game proper takes place 1400 years later after that prologue, right?
Yeah.
So it's a reasonable question of why is NieR a young boy still? And why is Yona a young girl still? You know, how did that happen? Well, it turns out this whole thing hasn't happened over and over again, but these replicants have aged and lived and died multiple times through this whole thing, right? It's been 1400 years of them living and dying and living and dying, and this is when they finally gain their own consciousness and decide like and live out lives of their own and make their own friends and thus, you know, go on this quest.
Well, what I gathered was because Devil and Popola in I think it's playthrough C/D, start talking about how they're kind of using NieR to find the Shadow Lord. So what I gathered was that, yes, like you said, that has kind of been happening, but they essentially didn't know where the Shadow Lord was to kind of facilitate.
Well, because he over
yeah,
time he went berserk, you know.
yeah,
Not all shade. Not when the soul is separated, and the Gestalt is separated. It's not
yeah,
immediately like the way it is. But he started going berserk, and they realized they were running out of time. They needed to rejoin. Um, the Gestalts with the replicants. Not for nothing, but the replicants were also, they were developing their own lives and their own consciousness.
right.
So something had to be done about that too. So yeah, Devil and Popola have been behind the scenes mastering this whole thing this whole time.
Yeah, and that was the point where in NieR Automata, I thought that they had I thought they were just my speculation. This is my speculation.
Uh-huh.
Is I thought they were designed to destroy humanity, but not realizing that they were actually designed to save humanity. But they just
Yeah.
failed.
Yeah.
Was that okay? I'm sorry. You could cut it out if that was like
because really that's that. I mean, we learned that in this game, right?
Yeah.
Like Devil and Popola are supposed to, and you can kind of surmise. I mean, we're about to talk about what happens in ending A and B. You can kind of surmise that humanity's like pretty fucked at this point, because what happens is Devil and Popola get killed by NieR, and then NieR goes and
Yeah.
kills his Gestalt. He kills the Shadow Lord.
Yeah.
So this is the end of the game, right? This kind of happens at the end of every ending. Um, NieR kills his own Gestalt. Um, Project Gestalt can't be completed. The soul cannot rejoin with the body. So who knows what happens next, right? Play NieR Automata to find out. But anyway,
It's also worth noting after you kill, which one is it? Devil or Popola that you kill first?
Devila.
Yeah.
Devila, yeah.
Yeah, after you kill Devila, Popola just goes berserk herself, which is kind of so she, regardless of what they were intended to do, like she was just gonna fucking take you out anyway.
God, and can we talk about this game is super emotional, and I hope I might come back to this again later because I
Yeah,
just
this is
love
the
it
best
so
scene
much.
in the entire game.
No, not even that. This whole game is so emotional, but what really adds to that is the fucking music.
Yeah, of course.
Because that
Yes.
scene, and I think that scene was actually better done in the original version. I think her screams and her freak out when her sister is murdered, and she's like, "There's no stopping, no one stops, no!" Like it was, chills, fucking incredible. And with the Song of the Ancients coming on at that time, which is meant to be like a song that's primarily sung by Devil and Popola.
Yeah.
There's actually a side quest that you can complete where they sing a duet of it.
Yeah.
And so that song is so heavily associated with them.
It's interesting
Oh,
it's
it's
interesting you say
incredible.
it was done better in the original. If I remember correctly, I thought all the same voice actors came back to do
But they
Replicant.
still re-recorded a lot.
Oh,
There's
okay.
they are all the same voice actors, but they re-recorded a lot of the lines. They kind of redid some of the script. It's not all the same.
Oh, okay.
One thing that I am glad was kept pretty much entirely the same. Going back to that midpoint is when Vice is kind of in his daze and Kaine's whole "Vice, you dumbass." That whole rant is pretty much intact exactly as it was, and that whole sequence is perfect.
Mhm.
It's actually funny. They don't do it immediately in the new replicant version, but in the original, whenever you boot up the game and boot up the disc, you know how games will have a running set of scenes or whatever when you boot the
Yeah.
game up and sit in the idle in the menu or whatever, it always opens up with the "Vice, you dumbass" rant,
Yeah.
just to a black screen. But it's when I booted up the game, because I typical in my fashion, I played the PS3 version, and then when Replicant came out, I played through the PS4 version. I played a lot of NieR, y'all.
He did.
Yeah,
I
I pity you.
I played a lot of NieR.
I
Um,
pity you.
but knowing really little about the game and whatnot, booting up that PS3 disc, and the first thing I'm hearing is a very angry Laura Bailey going, "Vice, you dumbass!" I was like, "Hell,
Yeah.
what is going on?" And
Yeah,
then actually getting to that scene was like, "Wow."
I was streaming and I was processing my thoughts on the ending, and then all of a sudden that played. I was like, "Whoa!" But I love it. I love how vulgar she is.
Yeah.
Laura Bailey, who, fun fact, that's a very familiar name. What big game?
That's because she's
Abby?
been like,
Abby, yeah.
she's also been
For
like
those
in
who don't know,
almost every. She's
she's
basically
like the
Troy Baker.
female. Yeah, she's a female Troy Baker. Yeah.
Yeah,
Troy Baker is the male Laura Bailey. Yeah, they're both so
that's
prolific
right.
and been in so many things you've played.
Yeah.
So anyway, that happens at the end of pretty much every ending. Ending A and B. NieR kind of reunites with Yona. Yona releases a part of that boss fight against the Shadow Lord is Yona releases the Gestalt Yona.
Mm-hmm.
Or really, actually, sorry, let me rephrase that. Gestalt Yona releases Replicant Yona. So Gestalt Yona kind of like sacrifices herself and lets herself go so that Replicant Yona, because she could tell, she's suffering too. She wants to
Yeah.
be reunited with her brother or father, depending on the version, just as much as they want their livelihood back, right? They want their existence back. And Gestalt Yona decides that she's gonna let them have it, right? And she lets herself go. The Shadow Lord's pretty pissed about that, but Replicant NieR kills Gestalt NieR, reunites with his sister, and you have to do this interesting thing where you call her back, and she is asking you questions like, "Oh, what's my favorite food? What's what do I love to do, and
Right.
who do I love more than anyone, or what do I
Yeah.
love more than anyone?" You have to input your own name, which I think is it's a very meaningful way of doing that and making that choice, so to speak.
Right.
But they reunite. Kaine proceeds to leave. She's got her own shit to take care of. And ending A, we see a flashback of NieR and Yona like chilling in the village. Ending B, we see the Shadow Lord,
Yeah.
Gestalt NieR and Gestalt Yona
Yeah.
kind of reunite, and you see a lot of the other fallen Gestalts there in the supposed afterlife.
So
That's kind
the
of. Go ahead.
so the implication here is that Yona and NieR their replicants chose to just live the rest of their lives out as normally as possible.
Yeah, and it's
Knowing
basically. Sorry.
just knowing that humanity, I mean, do they like the thing is you don't really have a sense of how much these characters understand what's happening, like because they're sentient. Like, do they know they're replicant? Do they know about this project? Even as the player, like, you're kind of putting these pieces together. So I imagine NieR, like, I don't think he purposefully, because he could feel like the villain at this point, right? But like, I don't think he purposefully lived his life out with his sister and then died eventually because that's what's gonna happen.
The important thing
point
to
is,
note.
it doesn't matter. Like, he
Yeah.
just wants to sit, like, because I think that's the whole point of those first two endings, is that essentially they both ended up kind of getting what they wanted, and it goes back to that dual perspective type deal. I mean, granted, the two of them are in the afterlife, um, uh, presumably, but
And
that's the whole point.
a couple key things to keep in mind is endings A and B are cut short, right? Because ending C and D are really extensions of that of A and B. It's just they cut that short and expect you to play it again in order to uncover more of it. And also the important thing to talk about with A and B is the dichotomy not only of the endings but of the playthroughs. Ending
Right.
A is very much from your perspective. You want to save your sister, and you go and you do that. Then you start over. You start from when you save Kaine, and you get Kaine's backstory. We'll talk about that when we start talking more about characters. But that entire playthrough, you get a lot more perspective about that other side.
About the
Right.
shades.
The shades. And get, like, you see there's a lot of new footage and a lot of new scenes, and you learn, now knowing what you know, that the Gestalts are really the real humans, the real human souls. You find, you see that, right? And I think
You essentially get the backstory to all the bosses.
Yeah.
And I personally, I think the most impactful one there is the Junk Heap.
Yes, of course.
With Khalil and P33.
I also like the facade.
I would say the
one.
mermaid.
Yeah.
The facade one. I was about to say the mermaid. Honestly, they're all, well. The one, the hook is kind of intrinsically tied to Kaine's backstory, but that's probably. I would say the Little Mermaid one, the little girl. It's also
that. Again, I got a note. That's entirely new to this version of the game. That was not in the original whatsoever. The whole thing with the ferryman, the red bag guy. He's entirely new to this game, or to this version of the game. Because they needed to get you an excuse to go to Seafront and I guess get attached.
God, I just have to say right here the part where he mistakes the blood from she was eating somebody she thinks it's period blood.
Yeah,
I was like, that's such Yoko Taro humor. Like
that's the mailman specifically too, which and the other thing that I want to bring up is the Little Mermaid story, new to the game, but it was one of the novellas in Grimoire NieR.
Okay.
So it's just one of the things that it happened during the events of the main game. They actually visualized it and put it in the main game.
But I think I have to agree. At the end of the day, the robot and the little boy is probably the most impactful one.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you, Delaila, about Rock, the wolf in Facade. Also a very impactful story, and I think overall, like, still the Facade story as a whole is is definitely the most emotional. But from a shade perspective, I feel like Khalil's is the most tragic.
Yeah.
Well,
because it's like a never-ending cycle of murder.
Right. And that was the one where you most find out that so many of these shades are innocent. Because he's just a kid and he's separated from his mother. And his mother's killed, and
this robot chose to be the guardian for him.
And the brother, and this is where, like, the Junk Heap story is probably the second best in my opinion, because it's just so fucked up. You have is the younger brother Gideon? I think the younger brother is Gideon.
Gideon is the younger brother. I don't remember what the older brother's name was.
Older brother. He's not in the game for as long as Gideon is. But Gideon just loses his mind, and he has no one to blame but himself. Because he inadvertently was the cause of death for his brother, and he just doesn't want to accept it. And he takes it out on the machine.
Well, I don't think he even I mean, maybe I'm forgetting something. I don't think he knows that.
I feel like you can put it up to interpretation, right? When he turns around, like, he obviously slipped. Like, he should know that he slipped on that like metal plate or whatever that caused everything to fall and kill his brother. And he turns around, he sees a machine, and I who knows? He might think that it's himself, but he doesn't want to blame himself. It's easier to blame. There was a machine there. I'm gonna blame that instead. And it just
definitely.
It leads to this, like, completely irrational hatred of them.
But I think it's... Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Delaila.
No, I was just saying, even when he's trying to pull his brother out from under it, and, like, he rips his arm off.
Yeah.
That was so, because you could, for a kid that doesn't understand that that's gonna be the result, for them to, like, that makes the death more traumatic than it needs to be. Like, seeing the blood and your brother's arm ripped off because you were trying to, get him out from under.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was gonna say. Is I don't know if I would agree saying it's his fault, and this again goes back to that perspective thing, because of how traumatic it is. I think he's just fucked up in the head.
And this is like he had just lost his mom like years before as well, so it's just like trauma after trauma. I feel bad
it's
for the
really
kid.
it's really just a tragic story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That everybody kind of loses because of circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
That really isn't any particular person's fault.
Yeah.
His mom was just trying to get it on with some dude in the junk heap.
Yeah, man.
She died.
She's a fucked up mom, man.
Yeah.
She cared more about getting some D than, taking care of her kids.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I don't know.
and the brother knew and was just like, he knew he couldn't do anything about it, right? Like,
Yeah.
but the younger brother, he was so Gideon was so young at that point, like he couldn't accept he couldn't know about that. He like
Yeah.
they weren't gonna tell him.
And even before
Yep.
it all, he was like an annoying like mama's boy. Like he was constantly complaining and like
Yeah.
begging to see his mom and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Honestly, I just feel bad for the older brother. Not only does he get killed by fucking unceremoniously by a bunch of metal get falling on him, and then he gets his arm torn off.
Yeah.
He's the one who has to shoulder everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now Gideon can shoulder things with his arm.
Yeah, he ain't
Yoink.
he ain't shouldering anything. 'Cause he ain't got a shoulder no more.
Yeah. Yeah, the B playthrough was definitely um it gave that perspective, right? Like it really showed us it showed us like took what we learned about the gestalts, the shades, and just made it so much more obvious and so much more painful of what we're doing. And that was kind of that flip of the script, right? This is showing like, no, like do you think you're doing something? Do you think you're doing the right thing? Are you sure? And that this is kind of
Yeah.
what makes you question that. That's where that in Yoko Taro's inspiration from 9/11 comes in. Of
Yeah.
both of these sides think that they're justified, and you're presented with both of those sides, and you start to realize like, wow, it's really fucked up that we're just we're just murdering these people, not realizing that they're really the real people.
Yeah.
Something I also didn't notice out in the northern plains, there's a bunch of smaller shades, right? And you can kind of surmise, uh, especially from the fact that a lot of them drop old school books.
Yeah.
They're children.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the lemon shades are babies. Like
yeah,
newborn babies.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what? I was calling them the lemon shades this whole time, and then when they finally explained it, I was like, oh no, the lemons are babies, and I'm killing them.
And it gives a lot more perspective when you enter the ballroom in the Shadow Lord's castle. They come out and you find out they're babies, and the people that you see dancing in that ballroom, they turn into shades. Well, they're in like they're kind of in a sanctuary, right? And you enter their sanctuary, and they have to protect themselves, so they become hostile.
Yeah.
And it's just really fucked up. And the other thing that I want to talk about, those small shades in the Northern Plains, there's several times in the game, your instinct when you see enemies is to attack them. When you first enter the Northern Plains to get like the sheep's wool, sorry, the mutton, and you go to go back, and there's 3 shades that pop up. They don't attack you.
Huh, I didn't even know that.
They're totally not hostile. You attack them and they become hostile and you kill them.
And then a bunch more pop up.
Yeah, I mean over time, because like you've become such a hostile force that they have to protect themselves, because you kind of are the bad guy throughout this entire game. It's just it's all a matter of perspective.
Yeah, and they in Brute A, they do kind of hint at it a little bit, specifically with the facade arc, where when you're going through the desert towards facade, Weiss is like, "Oh, you ever wonder why shades come in wolf form?" And then you don't learn until playthrough B that like the wolves were actually living there, and the people of facade, or the not people of facade, because they're not people, but they basically created this kingdom above their like lush foresty area, and now they have no way to sustain themselves, and So yeah, and then seeing like God, I'm trying to wrap my head around that specific arc with the wolf, but like the owner like put his soul into the wolf or something like that.
So what happened there? And those wolves aren't those are actual wolves. They're not shades. But what
Right.
happened was the wolf was brought up by an actual like a human man, and
Yes.
they were both, I believe they both were dying, and the man who Rock, the wolf, referred to his grandfather, the man wanted to prioritize Rock's livelihood and Rock's safety. So he had him get gestaltized instead
Right.
of himself, so that
Yes.
he could live on, and the old man passed away.
Yeah. So you're
Before
right.
he,
Weiss's commentary was, "Will you ever wonder why there's wolves in a desert?"
yeah,
That's what.
well, but they also do question like, there's a wolf shade, like what's that about? And
Yeah.
because it's really at that time, I think it's like the only animal that you see as a shade. Obviously, there's the big ass boar
Or
that you fight in the castle, which I'm not really sure what the commentary is about the boar
The
shade.
boar. Yeah.
I mean, it kind of morphs from I believe like the shade, or no, after kind of kicks down the door. I'm mistaken. Never mind. Yeah, I'm not really sure what the story is with the boar shade, but yeah, with Rock, that's kind of the backstory. And that's also pretty vaguely told.
yeah,
Mhm.
Um, it's not as it's more obtuse than say Khalil and P33.
Yeah. Totally.
Um, we could also talk about the Airy and kind of the rumors about the Airy, or what we can kind of gather seemingly is that the Airy was sort of, it seems like they were invaded by shades over time and
Mm.
mhm.
were kind of coexisting without realizing they were coexisting
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
because because they call kind of the half breed, which
Well,
you could,
that's a whole other,
yeah,
yeah. Because you're, and that kind of is interesting, right? And again, I want to talk about the endings, or at least the first four endings before we talk about characters. Let's put a pin in that and talk about ending C and D
yeah.
Mhm.
while we're on a roll here. So, and what we come to learn about Kaine, I guess we do have to talk about Kaine a little more, huh? All right, we'll talk about Kaine real quick. I all over the place, guys. It wouldn't be an
This is a very
episode.
hard game to
Yeah.
articulate in an eloquent
Mhm.
way without like jumping because everything's so connected in all playthroughs.
Hey, it wouldn't be an episode of Read the Spoilers if we didn't jump all over the fucking place.
Yeah, but especially with a game like this.
Yeah. So opening of Route B, the second playthrough, we get one of those text adventures that like
It's not a text
visual,
adventure; it's
one
just
of
a
those
novel.
novels, one of those texts that Jason loves so much, that explains Kaine's backstory. And we're like in the first playthrough, we're kind of led to believe that the Aerie is prejudiced against Kaine because she's a half shade. She wasn't always a half shade. That
Right.
kind of happened at the end of her backstory. Really, the important thing about Kaine and why the Aerie, and what we come to learn about the Aerie, is that they're bigots, because Kaine is intersex, and she was bullied heavily because of it. And
I didn't gather that.
that's
Yeah.
not
How
really
did?
made that's not really made entirely clear, right?
Oh wow.
Where the fuck did you get that from?
That's confirmed.
No, no, no. I'm not saying I'm not doubting you. I just did
Right.
not pick that up at all.
It's not very, it's not like totally and explicitly clear in the game, right? It's like there's not really much that could inform you that Kaine is intersex, that she has both male and female genitalia. Um
Right. Yeah.
It's not fully explained, right? They never use those words to describe it. They never use those words to explain it. But like you kind of find out through that visual novel. I'll just keep calling them novel. Um, that she wasn't a half shade, and they're hinting at like I think they call her an it at some point, and they're like, oh, we know what you really are, and they 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 there's kids that bully her because of something relating to her body, and if it's not the fact that she's a shade, that's kind of how you can put it together that she is intersex.
My interpretation of it was that after you find out more about the shades and how they were really humans, my interpretation was that the people of the area were actually always shades, and they were discriminating against her because she wasn't a shade at that point.
Oh, see, that's that's an interesting way to interpret it. With what we are presented with in the area, you know, they're a very negative area with a lot of mean spirited people. But yeah, that is the situation with Kaine. I guess it's a good thing we're talking about this.
Yeah, no, that's actually more interesting.
I had no idea. Wait, so how exactly do they convey this? Is this like learned later?
In the novel section, like, she's kind of bullied because of something regarding her body. And seeing what we see about her body and knowing what we know, like, that's kind of how we're supposed to put the pieces together. And she's not a half shade at that point. She's just
No, I know. That's why I thought that the people in the area were just all shades. Yeah, okay.
No, the people in the area are actually just bigots, largely bigots.
Okay. Right.
And discriminating against her because she's intersex. She's bullied because of that.
So basically, it's not in the game; it's in extended material.
Well, no, I mean it is in the game in that novel, but and that novel was in the original version, by the way. So
okay. So that text chunk is from the novel. Okay. Gotcha.
No. That that was in the original game.
Okay.
That whole section. The only one that was added, or there may be two that were added, were the one that were like the one that fleshes out Emil's story wasn't in there originally, but the one that about Kaine was.
Okay.
And like it was, you know, explicitly confirmed by Yoko Taro in interviews, whatever, that she's intersex, and it's also when it's explicitly confirmed that Emil is gay, which we'll get into when we talk about Emil.
That one was more obvious, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll say that's obvious in this version. It's not at all in the original.
Oh, wow.
And we'll talk about that when we talk about Emil. But yeah, that's kind of the whole backstory with Kaine, with her upbringing, and then there's a shade that comes and kills her grandmother, who was the one that kind of came in and took care of her when she was being so heavily bullied and kind of had no one to go to. This other shade, after her grandmother was being killed, saw her in a moment of weakness when she had lost two of her limbs, and said, like, "Hey, I'm like, you want some help?" And he possesses her and says, "Haha, now you got to go kill things for me, because I'm like this fucking psycho serial killer, and I'm gonna feed off your negative energy. And if you ever start to get soft, I'm gonna take over fully." So he like Tyran, his name's Tyran. He kind of uses her, right? He gives her what he wants, but he tortures her for the rest of her life until we get to C and D. And it's great. It's great in in Route B, where we start to hear Tyran talking to Kaine and kind of delve into her inner workings, you know, her mind, what she hears and what he says to her. It's really it's fucked up. Really.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah.
I feel like I know less about Kaine than I thought I did.
Yeah,
I'm like racking over my brain. I can't think of a single thing that intimated
like hinted at that.
Well,
I mean, and plus, like, Yoko Taro saying that, like, that's something Yoko Taro would say just to say. He's a weird motherfucker, but like,
here's the thing.
I don't doubt you. Like, yeah. I'm not like trying to argue you.
The way that she dresses is kind of indicative of that. Like, now that I'm thinking about it,
the next thing
and her grandma's commentary on like you're beautiful, like nobody needs to tell Kaine she's beautiful. You just look at her and see. You know what I'm saying? But her grandma kept having to drill that into her brain. So that now that we're talking about it, that does make more sense.
And that's kind of what makes her such a great character, right? Is she puts on a front where she's extremely like vulgar and extremely tough. She's super insecure.
Yeah,
right?
no, that much is obvious. Yeah.
Yeah, and like there's two reasons why you could gather she wears lingerie. One of those reasons is she's half shade, exposing as much, and the shades are weak to sunlight. Um, exposing as much skin to the air and the sun as she can. And remember, the sun never sets. In this world, I'm not really sure. I think something with the Drakengard ending E, I think, affected the tides or whatever. I think that's the explanation. I'm not really sure why the sun never sets, but the sun never sets. So exposing as much sun or skin to the sun as she can kind of keeps the Tyran at bay, right? He's possessing kind of just half of her body, and she wants to keep it that way. The other reason,
That's
though, is
why she couldn't go in the ship. It,
yeah,
oh,
I think so.
wow.
Um, and the other reason you can kind of put together is it makes her more feminine, right? She's
Mm-hmm.
showing off her body, and she's
Mhm.
she's insecure about it. She's trying to be more secure in who she is because she identifies as female. So
Mhm.
she wants to flaunt that and kind of identify that way and really show it.
So, getting the trophy to look up her skirt and her
That's
kicking the shit out of you.
that's why that trophy exists.
I thought they were just being perverted, like with 2B.
Well,
That
they
also
are.
exists in that trophy also exists in Automata, doesn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
but this one, Kaine, is much more violent when you
She
do
like
it.
kicks you,
Mm.
beats the shit out of you, threatens
I
you.
didn't do it, so yeah, I wouldn't
Well,
know.
the reason
Mhm.
because is, Kaine's packing a little more than 2B is.
That's
So,
something. Yeah, I feel like that's something you have to kind of be. You don't want to be too explicit. I get why he was
yeah.
trying to be subtle with it, but you do with something like that. You do need to be like with a
I mean,
meal.
I
With a
think,
meal, the line, and we'll get into it. The line that you can put together. Oh, he's gay.
yeah,
It's pretty explicit.
yeah.
Like with this, like if you hadn't said anything, I would have never known. Like,
Yeah.
And
Same.
like I said, the pieces are there. It's just, it is kind of hard to realize they're pieces of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And putting them together, like, it's not something I realized until I was reading more materials, because I obviously had a lot of questions about the story of this game, so
there
I
are
started
other
doing a
parts
lot of
of
reading.
Kaine's story though that are like that. Like if, for instance, if you don't know the ending of Drakengard, if you don't know the ending that we talked about earlier, part of her Kaine's story is not going to make any sense really either. Like
What part specifically?
we'll get to it later, but ending E.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about ending C and D. Which again, continuation of endings A and B. You have to get all the weapons in order to see these endings, which is a little arduous, and
The
it's
nod.
it's it's a thing that was in Drakengard, right? Like, in order to get ending E in Drakengard, you had to, or maybe even more than just that ending. You had to find all the weapons in that game, so it was kind of like a tradition that carried on into NieR.
I
Um,
I feel bad for people that maybe are playing this game that don't like I knew because I trophy hunted, right?
mhm.
People that just play this game.
Well, they do tell you when you get ending B, it's like, to see ending C,
Yeah.
find all the weapons, but
Okay.
you don't know where they all are necessarily. And
Yeah,
luckily we
that's gonna
live in,
turn a lot of people off.
yeah, it is for sure, which I hopefully it doesn't, but um like, luckily we live in the age of the internet. It's so easy to find what you're missing and
Yeah.
figure out what you still need. I can't say it would have been the same if this game released in like 2000.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally. You would have had to
Um
get a book.
yeah, you had to buy the strategy
Go.
guide.
Yeah.
The Prima
I did
guides, man. Yeah.
I did buy the strategy guide, by the way. I
Of
have this.
course you did. I'm not surprised.
Um
You
yeah.
see that behind me, folks? I have real books. Okay.
So do I, somewhere in there. Most of them are games. Um All right, ending C and D. It's a continuation, right? When Kaine goes to walk away, saying, "I got my own shit to take care of," um, Tyran kind of notices in her, like, "Ooh, you've gotten really soft," and she starts to go berserk. And she goes berserk earlier in the game when she's like almost killed, basically. But she goes berserk again, and you have to stop her. And Tyran kind of and Tyran actually doesn't cause it. He starts to realize like a change in her heart or whatever, and he actually speaks out to NieR. And it's like, hey, you don't know me, but I can help you save Kaine. I'm gonna pin her down when I do that. Like, get ready.
It's also worth noting that in that final fight with the Shadow Lord, you do hear in the dialogue between the inner dialogue between Kaine and Tyran that she's basically like, look, man, I'm checked out of this world. I'm ready to die.
Yeah.
But I'll be NieR's sword one more time, I think is what she says. Or I'll be his sword one more time.
Yeah. And another thing to note, another thing we forgot to talk about is prior to this, and this happens in all the endings again, it's during that whole final dungeon. Prior to this, Emil sacrifices himself. We didn't talk about this. Emil sacrifices.
How did we jump over that? Yeah.
I don't know.
That's the best. That's the best scene in the game.
It's so good. I feel like you could say that about like a dozen scenes in this game.
No, this is the best scene in the game.
To each their own. It's one of the best. But anyway, yeah, Emil sacrifices himself, and we get that scene after that happens where NieR is so defeated and Kaine is just like, she's just, she's upset, and there's so many ways to interpret this scene, but she starts beating NieR up, right? And then they almost like they're almost you could cut the sexual tension with a knife. Right. And she backs away, and then they continue on.
Like usual, she tries to deal with her emotion through violence and anger.
Well, more so, she's upset. Emil, one of her closest friends, just to sacrifice himself so they could live. That's a sign of weakness, and she can't be weak, otherwise she's going to get taken over.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I also feel like Kaine has wanted to die since she's beat the Hook Shade. Like. Yeah. After that, she was like, okay, my purpose is over. I killed the shade that killed my grandma. I'm done. And NieR and Weiss were like, oh, come on. Like, that's weak. Like, come on, let's just keep living.
Friends now.
Yeah, exactly. And multiple times through this game, you see that she's ready to just let go. And I feel like this was just another reason why she doesn't want to be around, because she has to deal with the pain of like losing someone that she cares about or whatever. Yeah. Again, you know.
And yeah, that's a great point. She has kind of been done, and more and more shit just keeps happening. So yeah, I feel like it's a lot of that. It's a lot of her trying to keep her emotions in check before she gets taken over. And then there's the scene where the moment where they almost kiss, because they have feelings for each other, and she can't admit it, and he's so focused on saving Yona. But yeah, she goes berserk. You fight her, and Tyran helps you to disable her, and you're given a choice. And the two choices are, you kill her or you save her. So we'll start with killing her, putting her out of her misery. Again, like Delaila so aptly put it, like she's kind of wanted her life to end for a while. So you kind of give her what she wants, and Tyran speaks to you on her behalf and says she told me to tell you thank you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of her parting words to NieR.
Yeah. You also say you love her, don't you?
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's any. I don't think there's any explicit mention of love whatsoever in the game. It's all just like the way you interpret things.
That's something I don't know how you guys felt about this. I felt like the Emil's feelings for NieR were better paced and made more clear over the course of the game. I felt like Kaine's feelings towards NieR, there wasn't even a hint of it until like the last 20 minutes of the game.
I don't know if I agree with that.
There was that moment where when she got out of her petrification and she saw him as an adult, and she made the comment about like how how much older he is, but if you saw her eyes, like it was typical anime eyes, like they just got really big. Her pupils got huge. That's when I was like, oh, okay, like she's into him, like romantically, or at least she's attracted to him. But yeah, besides that moment and towards the end, I didn't get that tension either.
I think a lot of it has to do with her as a character and what she has to deal with. You know, she has to keep Tyrion at bay. She can't have feelings like that, otherwise she's done.
Yeah.
She has to swallow all that, right? And I think that really plays into why that stuff isn't as outwardly explained or expressed through her character through most of the game. And I think there are hints throughout. It's again, there's a lot to be said about the subtlety of this game in most of its plot points.
Sometimes a little too subtle.
Sometimes a little too subtle. You know? I feel like the big reason why I've been talking so much this episode, and I really feel bad about that, but like a lot of this stuff wasn't explained, and I read up about it, and now we're here to talk about it, and I'm like, oh god, you guys don't know this, the audience probably doesn't know this, and now I feel like it has to be talked about.
Well, no, I mean, this is why I love doing this podcast, just to like rear off for a second, because when I play the games, I have my own like reactions to them, and then when I stop playing the game, like off camera or just end it, I have my own processing of it. But then I have a whole new level of processing when I talk to you guys, and then after I talk to you guys, I think about it even more. So I just like doing this, is what I'm saying, I guess.
You heard it here first, folks. Delaila likes the podcast that she does with us every month.
But yeah, I definitely get different perspectives, you know? Especially with games like this that aren't like clear cut of what's going on.
Yeah. So sorry, Jason, did you have anything else to add about ending C, or are we good to talk about ending D?
Ending C. So no, I think that was it. Basically,
it's pretty much
it's kind of the bog standard what you would think would happen.
And then
it's a quote unquote good ending in my opinion. Like it felt like the better decision.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, here we go with ending D, where you do something so fucking unique.
Again, like I said, I brought this up a lot in the NieR Automata thing that we did. Something that you can only do with storytelling in a video game because it's an interactive medium.
Yeah.
And this is what I love about Yoko Taro.
The way to save Kaine that Tyran suggests, give up your own existence. And basically what it means is Tyran would kind of transfer himself into NieR. I think this is how this would have worked. Is Tyran would go to NieR instead, and they would disappear together. And that would free her of Tyran, which is what happens. And what you have to do is you input your name, and then you watch everything in your save file disappear.
Yeah.
Like every item, every magic you collected, every word.
Painstakingly, everything.
All the weapons that they made you collect.
Those 30 weapons you had to 33 in this version. All the weapons, they disappear. And you watch it all just go away. And then Kaine wakes up, and her and Yona don't know who, like, don't really know each other, and they don't really know why they're there, and they don't know what just happened. Really, no. So that's not completely true. Sorry, Kaine thinks that she just did everything that NieR did. Really.
Yes, and so did Yona.
She believes, yeah, that's true. Sorry, I'm getting mixed up there. So
yeah,
what I'm getting at is they have no recollection or knowledge of this no one that wasn't there because he never existed, because you just deleted him.
Yeah.
And that was the last ending in the original version. We didn't have the ending E in the game. Ending E was in Grimoire NieR, but it wasn't in the original version of the game. We got treated to that in this version of the game.
And I thought that's why this is why I thought that the replicants were kind of like the androids in Automata, because of the memory. without going into plot details, the memories situation between the two games.
I guess, do we want to just jump right into ending E now?
Yeah, the one you almost confused D with by accident. Because this is where Kaine wakes up and doesn't remember anything.
No, she wakes up in ending D at the Shadow Lord's castle, and then her and Yona briefly talk, and Yona's like, thank you for saving me.
Yeah.
And she's like, did I? Oh yeah, I guess I did. Like,
yeah.
And they also both do feel like they're forgetting something too. That's also important. Like, they feel like there's something that something or someone that they forgot, but they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so to get ending E, you have to start a new save file. Oh, and a detail that I absolutely love. When you go to start a new save after ending D and you put in that same name, it doesn't let you.
Yeah.
Tells you
I cheated though.
For some reason you can't use that name. Why would you do?
I did NieR without a capital and NieR with a capital R.
Cheater! Oh my god!
I know. I'm terrible.
You play
the title screen also changes when you go to do ending E.
Oh, I love that shit.
And then they also change it. Well, it changes after D, and then it also changes more after E. Kind of like a nice little signifier that you did the thing.
Yeah.
The winner is you.
Place with the lady.
So you start a new game with a new name, and you get up to that point where you beat Hook in the Aerie, and you go to wake Kaine up, and you think all is the same, and then until it's not, and Kaine wakes up from a dream 3 years later, and you're playing as Kaine.
Yeah.
Holy shit, so fucking cool. And I think it's great that she has like her own unique play style. Since Tyran's no longer with her, she no longer has access to magic, but she is like a super skilled, super strong warrior. So like she could still kick some serious ass.
And this is the part that's exclusive to Replicant, right? Like this wasn't in the original.
To this new version of the game, it wasn't in either the original Replicant or the original Gestalt versions of the game. Again, the ending E was a short story or a novella that was in Grimoire NieR. They just have adapted it and showed it in the game with some changes. I don't know the full extent of the changes, and but I do know like the one big one, and we'll talk about that and why, kind of to give it a little more shock value when we get to it. But yeah, you wake up as Kaine, and you're playing as Kaine, and she's living in her little shack, and she goes out into the northern plains, and she's pissed because she had another dream, nightmare, whatever, and there's this person that she can't help but feel that she forgot.
Yeah. And first thing that she says is, I guess I'll just kill some shit.
Yeah. So she goes out, and you also because you get the loading screens with Yona's diary, and it's great that they actually had new loading screens with new diary entries that are from Yona, talking that like she has kind of had a relationship with Kaine in the past few years. They're kind of friends, and she's like, oh, I wonder how she's doing, and like, oh, I wonder if she's having the same weird dreams that I am.
Now is also a good time to mention on those loading screens the icon. So for most of the first two playthroughs, it's just Yona walking, and she'll trip every now and again, kind of just loading screen. You'll notice though, during C and D, and especially E, it starts to change. So you'll get, I think, when you're doing your fourth playthrough for D, you'll start getting a little bit of Kaine, and sometimes you'll also start getting the pod from Automata.
Yep.
Which
that's the case. I definitely didn't notice.
Yeah. I noticed that. I love that so much.
And it's also interesting that out in the world, like there's more shades. More shades are going berserk, and you actually wind up finding some lunar tears out in the wild, which is another interesting note because the lunar tear is supposed to be this really rare flower, and I think there's 2 different areas where you'll actually find them blooming. But Kaine doesn't want to go to Yona's village, because she's still kind of concerned about freaking people out there. that's another interesting thing to note is that throughout the whole game, it's always called NieR's village. Now it's called Yona's village.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Who's NieR? Doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And
Kind of never wanted to go into any of the villages throughout all the playthroughs.
Yeah. So Kaine runs into somebody who was sent on an errand, and I guess this is a good time to talk about the Forest of Myth, because there's a lot of mystery surrounding the Forest of Myth, and definitely want to talk about how like Delaila would do whole ass streams of her just reading.
Don't do it.
Yeah, I fucking hated that.
I think I saw you tweet out about it. That like, oh yeah, if you want like a whole ass audiobook, I got you covered.
Yeah, it pretty much some of the episodes that I released were just me reading.
Yeah.
I think the whole game had like a total of 5 hours of reading.
The worst part about that section was that I don't know if you guys experienced this, but during those text adventure sequences, I had parts where I would go through and I would put in the correct answer and it would still kick me all the way back to the beginning. And I would literally put in the same answer and then it would just let me go.
Because there was one that changed the answer. Like the girl with brown eyes and the sister killed like 67 versus 33. So they changed it so that you actually had to read it.
It's kind of testing your reading comprehension and your
No. Oh yeah, it was like 60. Yeah, it was like 63 plus the sister or whatever. I remember.
Well, and another thing to note about those stories is those are some of them. I'm trying to think. Some of those stories kind of hint at other stories within the world. I believe I read a theory that the one story the one story about the female warrior and her comrades or whatever. I read a theory that that's talking about Kaine's grandmother.
Huh.
And that's who that's hinting about. The story about the young boy who kind of becomes resentful. I forget who that's referring to, but it's about somebody that's dying of like chlorination syndrome.
Right, Project Gestalt or whatever.
And there's the story about the red dragon that the tree forgot, and that's definitely talking
Gestalt.
about.
Or I'm sorry, Dragon Guard, not Gestalt.
And talking about Angelus. And what we so yeah, and the whole what's it called? It's not called the Death Dream. The thing that's plaguing them in the first half of the game, and you have to do like the different text adventures.
Oh yeah, what's it called? Nightmare? I don't.
It's like
I don't.
Something dream. It's got dream in the name. I can't remember exactly what it's called. I thought I don't know. I thought those were cool. I thought it was like because Yoko Taro likes to do the genre bending, and this was like a very unexpected genre bend. It was text adventures. Suddenly you're talking to someone and you get sucked into this very obtuse and this very I'm trying to think of the imaginative world, but like they're dreaming, right? Like I don't know, and when you're dreaming, like, and when you wake up, like, you don't remember the visual of the dream. You just remember what happens, and that's kind of what you're getting here. Is just like a recounting of what happens in these dreams. I think it's really clever.
It should be mentioned that they're also technically memories, so they did actually happen.
Yeah.
Because the tree, and we'll learn more about this.
The game, the one in the second half of the game is very, very clearly the tree, the big tree in the Forest of Myth talking to you.
Yes.
Which we'll call the memory tree. It says, "Look at my memory," and he presents these memories to you. The other ones in the game, or from the actual villagers, it could be actual memories. It could just be something hokey going on. There's plenty of ways to interpret that, but I just want to talk from a gameplay perspective. I actually really liked those. Some of them could go a little lengthy.
Yeah, I think they were well written. Like, had I just been reading them to myself, I think I would have flew through it a lot faster and absorbed it a lot better than reading it out loud for a stream.
It's hard to like just stream that and then not read it out loud for your audience. I totally get that. And that could definitely sour you on the experience.
I think maybe I would have liked it better if I wasn't doing repeat playthroughs of it.
Yeah.
That's fair. Well, yeah, in repeat playthroughs, during the second half where you're doing the memory sequence, like I just spam everything. I stop on the page where I need to know the thing to know to move on, and I just spam through it. The first half where you go there to handle the dream issue, and you have like the statue riddle and the labyrinth. Those ones are in my opinion, the coolest. But that they're also done once and that's kind of done. But yeah.
Well, that's where the genre bending was most apparent there.
Yeah,
like that felt like a text adventure game.
Agreed. But yeah, want to talk about the Forest of Myth because that's where we're headed next in Ending E. We go to the Forest of Myth, and there's a big hole in that memory tree.
Everybody's dead.
Everyone's dead, and there's robots coming out of there. It's like, what the fuck is going on? What's all this? You kill them, you go into the tree, and you go deeper, and this was originally just one administrator down there, and now it's been re-envisioned as two. And okay, let me preface this. For the entirety of us talking about Ending E, no automata, like big automata spoilers, but some visual spoilers for automata are going to occur. This is kind of what they did to tie this game further into automata.
Yeah.
And it's like I said, mostly pretty much entirely visual spoilers.
Yeah.
But we run into, or we are greeted by these two like robots that I think I don't remember if they call themselves the administrators. Jason,
yeah, they do. I think
they do.
Okay.
Yeah.
They look familiar to you guys?
Yeah,
they look like Chibi 2B and 9S.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is if you look in the voice cast, they're voiced by the same voice actors as 2B and 9S. So they really, obviously, a lot of effort was made to make that connection apparent, right?
Yeah.
And bear in mind, this is still like a good several hundred, if not 1,000 years before Automata, before any events that pertain to Automata took place. So, it's just very eerie to go down there, and if you've played Automata, to see those two and be like, "Huh?"
Well, even Kaine, the way she moves and fights is a lot more acrobatic, like NieR Automata.
Yeah,
like
but I think that's just attributed to her character, you know.
Yeah.
They're not.
Well, I think because the design team, from what I understand, updated the combat a bit for NieR.
The combat is much more. It comes a lot closer to Automata in this version than the original did.
But I assume with Kaine, because they don't have as many gameplay mechanics because the magic's gone and all that.
Yeah,
they were a bit free to make it a little more fluid than it was with NieR.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, we go down there and you see those two administrators, and that's shocking. You delve further into this memory tree, and the administrators, what we find out is that they want to reboot Project Gestalt. They want to just like completely push the reset button on it. And they start sending the big robots, the P-33 models at Kaine. Until then, it starts sending out machine replicas of Kaine at her, and it starts to wear her down, right? Something else that we forgot. We're neglecting Emil big time on this one. Something we forgot to mention at the end of Ending B is that you find out Emil lived.
Yeah, his little head's rolling around.
Yeah. Well, we get as Kaine is getting the shit kicked out of her, and is basically about to be killed. Something pops up and stops that from happening, and you find out it's a fucking 4 or 6 armed Emil. He had a bunch of arms. 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. Emil
that
found
was
another
epic.
body. And there's I believe there's a short story that explains how he got a new body with the 4 arms. It's not explained in the game, so I won't go into it. But
yeah, to be fair, a lot was cut from this game. And it's kind of funny to think about considering how much time we put into it just to get what we got.
well, I think what I really
But
wish is just like it's not that things were cut; it's just things.
no, a lot was cut from this game. Like this is only 30% of what Yoko Taro originally put in.
A lot of it is
that's why there's so much in novels and shit.
Yeah, well, it would have been nice to have more of that incorporated to explain that stuff. But that's why I'm kind of just hoping for the novel to get localized. But point being, Emil shows up, saves the day, helps you take down all those kaines, and kind of makes the administrators retreat, and you go deeper into the rabbit hole. And what you come to find out about this memory tree is this is really just like a supercomputer for Project Gestalt, right? It's kind of like the core of the whole thing. And it's trying to reboot the whole process because obviously it failed. Right. NieR killed the Shadow Lord. Project Gestalt is it's done. So they're trying to make it undone. And you kind of wind up going into the server, the memory banks. And
yeah, the memory tree is literally a memory tree. It's literally a database.
And it changes the whole aesthetic of the game to that of NieR Automata, because NieR Automata focuses around androids. And it's so much more based around data. So it makes sense for them then doing this to kind of set that aesthetic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you delve deeper and you start fighting data memories of all the like a lot of the shades that you fought before, a lot of the bosses you fought before, and it all culminates in you having to fight Hook again. Which is a big deal for Kaine. That's the one. That's the shade that killed her grandmother.
So we thought.
What do you mean?
Well, keep going with the ending. Yeah.
Okay, so you're fighting Hook and you get your ass kicked, and then you hear a voice, a disembodied voice. And I should say that disembodied voice talked to you at the end of ending A to help you like get Yona back, but that voice is Vice, and he shows up to help you fight Hook, and like it's so great like listening to like Kaine and Vice's banter, because like their banter throughout the whole game, these characters are just like their personalities are just so great, and their relationships just are such a fantastic reflection of that. So
when it really is the game's, I should say the story's core strength.
Yeah,
the characters. Sure. Automata was a very plot and idea-driven game. Mm-hmm. Not that the characters were bad, just that it wasn't the focus of the story. This story is almost exclusively focused on characters.
Mm-hmm. Right, and there's a lot that you get from just running around and them having idle conversations.
Yeah, hussy.
Yeah,
I love that.
And so now with Kaine being the protagonist ostensibly in this ending, and Vice assisting her instead of NieR, you get their conversations a little more directly. And obviously they care about each other, but their relation, they when they start to get even like slightly mushy, they kind of realize this isn't really our thing. Let's go back to being dicks to each other, and they kind of do. And but they still like it. It's just so great. The characters in this game are just so fucking fantastic. But Vice assists her in defeating Hook. Jason, what did you want to bring up?
So you get another text flashback. I think I'm trying to remember when exactly. I think it's right before. Yes, it's right before Weiss shows up. The game kind of makes you fail, like it prevents you from fighting back, and then it starts going into another one of those text dumps.
Right.
In which it's an alternative version of her grandmother's death, where everybody is. It's not that, and it's not just her grandmother. It's everybody in the area, and they're not dying from shades. They're dying from the chlorination. They're puffing into pillars of salt, and that includes her and it's this text story is essentially her trying to carry away her grandmother to save her from this cloud of salt, but her grandmother literally just puffs away and turns into salt in her hands. So it kind of, my interpretation of it was, and ultimately it doesn't really matter for the point that the story is trying to make, but in terms of what actually happened, my interpretation was maybe Kaine's grandmother wasn't actually killed by shit at all. Maybe she died from white chlorination.
So
and this is it kind of like almost like a Final Fantasy VII type deal, where it's like a story that the character created for themselves,
right,
to deal with the grief.
That's a great interpretation. I'm not sure if that was the intention.
That's just how it came across to me. Because otherwise, I don't know why it would even be in there.
I think so. The thing to keep in mind is we're inside the memory tree at this point, right? And it's literally been collecting memories for over 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Almost a long time, right? Like this has been collecting memories, and it's just like a big database. I kind of just took it as it's kind of scrambling itself, right?
Actually, I know, I probably know why, because I actually forgot about this. Okay. In the story, Kaine starts turning into salt as well. So it might be the memory of the original Kaine, not the replicant one.
That's a good point. You might be right on the money with that one.
Yeah. So, okay. So it might have been like it might have been how her real grandmother died, not the replicant's grandmother.
Yeah, that's probably what it is, now that you mention it. Cool. Obviously you did ending E very recently. I finished ending E almost 2 months ago.
Yeah.
So it's like I actually kind of forgot about that whole text section.
What kind of supports that too is, like, I think there was some text too of Kaine going to get like medicine at the Aerie for her grandmother.
That was part of that's part of both, right? That was part of her original backstory. That's where she ran into the guy that originally bullied her.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also part of this, where everyone starts turning to salt.
Yeah.
No, it's a good parallel, and that's a good point. It probably is the original Kaine. And something else about Kaine that I probably should have mentioned. When we're talking about her being an intersex, the original Kaine is just flat out female. The fact that her replicant is intersex is actually part of a defect in the Gestalt program.
Interesting.
With the cloning process, there was because there were lots of errors with it, obviously, right? Like we have the replicants gaining consciousness. We have the Gestalts going berserk. Like obviously it's not perfect. So it somewhere it's explained. I don't remember where, but somewhere it's explained that it was an error in the program when it created her replicant, that it made her replicant intersex. But the original human Kaine is female with only female reproductive organs.
Okay.
Anyway, beating Hook, you have Kaine has like a touching goodbye with Vice, and she's able to. It's this beautiful speech where she's trying to recall and remember what she lost. And it's over time she remembers, and it all culminates in this big, it looks like a lunar tear, this huge lunar tear blooming in the earth, and in the center of it is her holding a naked NieR, and she was able to get him back. And that's ending E, is they are reunited.
And it kind of, her final words, the final line, kind of gets across, and that's why I said it doesn't really matter necessarily. Yeah. What she says, like the only thing worth, living for, the people you cherish, the people you care about. So it's kind of a nice wrap up to her arc, where she goes from not wanting to live anymore and just wanting to, fight for him that one last time, to, no, I'm going to stick around and keep fighting because I care about these people.
Yeah.
Which is a nice little touch. But it's also kind of dark and twisted when you think about the larger context of two perspectives.
Absolutely. that's that's the thing, right? Is that at the end of the day, these are bad people, right?
Well, they're not bad people.
They're not bad people, but they're people that did a bad thing, right?
Right.
Yeah, you're right. They're not bad people. They did do.
Because the Shades did bad things as well, but not necessarily for bad reasons. That's the whole point, I think.
Yeah, exactly. That is the.
They're all victims of the world that they live in. That's all.
Yeah, you guys are putting into words exactly what we need to hear. Thank you. I'm talking so much, I just get yeah. All right. That's NieR Replicant.
Yeah, man.
What a fucking game, guys.
Yeah, I honestly just because the way that they tell the stories is so brilliant that I feel like the redundant gameplay, it in some ways informs it a little more, but I feel like I wish there was a way to cut it out just a bit.
Just wish there wasn't a game in this game.
yeah, right. It kind of basically it's too much. Like going back to the freaking places multiple times throughout one playthrough, and then you got to do it over and over. It was just really it bogged me down. It took me kind of away from really thinking about the game in the way that I wanted to think about it.
Yeah, it's just draining to you get one ending, and that only tells you part of the ending, right? And you have to go play through the whole second half of the game again. And then you get another, really not even another part, just the other half of that part of the ending. And then you got to go get all the weapons, and then you got to go beat it all again. And then you have to make a choice. And there's ways to get around doing a whole other playthrough after that choice, right? I think both of you wound up doing it.
Yeah.
I'm apparently a masochist, so both
yes,
times.
Yes, we all know that though.
Both times I played through this whole game, I did it 4 times each time because I needed to have A, B, and C on my save file because I have no idea why. But yeah, it's draining. It's draining. It's exhausting, and I wish it could have been structured better for sure.
Yeah.
And I think it's the only thing that keeps this game from being like a 10 out of 10 for me. It 100% is in my top 10 games of all time. Both NieR and NieR Replicant and NieR Automata, 100% top 10 games for me. They're both. That's why, shame on any of you that listen to this episode and haven't played this game, because we just ruined it for you because you really deprived yourself of such a unique experience. It's such a special game and such a special series, and I hope it continues to bring these super imaginative and emotional things to the medium, because it's so fucking creative and it's so fucking incredible.
Yeah, while also being I don't know, being more integrative of alternative material.
Yeah, well, and
somehow
that's the problem, right? NieR Automata is guilty of that too, and even past. I feel like it's a lot of Japanese franchises. It's a lot of Square Enix franchises, right?
Yeah.
It's
Scarlet Nexus is doing the same thing now too.
Oh,
that's
God.
not Square, but yeah, Japanese, I think.
It's like when you look at something like Final Fantasy VII and how to get to really understand everything with that. There's a whole compilation with several different games.
To be fair, with Final Fantasy VII is a complete story in and of itself, and you don't.
You're right.
That compilation. That compilation stuff came
supplemental.
That compilation stuff came after and was added after the fact. The story wasn't written with any of that in mind. That's just shit that people afterwards added on.
No, I agree, and I think that NieR Replicant still, in and of its own right, is still a complete story. It's just there's some background and there's some exposition missing that really would have been welcome.
I would say there's a lot, actually, not even just some. The fact that you have to understand Drakengard to even understand how the events of this happen, and then all these other elements to the characters individually, like Kaine, the information I didn't know about her.
What I'm saying is, there is a complete story there. It's just without that stuff, you might not fully understand it, right?
Right.
That's kind of what I'm getting at. I'm by no means really defending it. I'm just presenting.
Yeah, I definitely have to say I did not like this game. I wasn't as overjoyed with this game as I was with Automata.
Okay.
And again, I hate having to keep comparing it.
I don't want to keep comparing them. It's hard sometimes, It is hard when, especially coming off of us playing Automata. And if you listen to that episode, you can tell we all love it so much. Jason and I especially. I know Delaila hated some things about it, like the math,
repetition, and
But point being, I don't want to spend too much more time.
Can we move on into gameplay though? Like, speaking of maps.
Wait. Real quick before we go into gameplay, we keep neglecting.
We gotta talk about characters.
The best character in this game, Emil. So we keep talking about how he has feelings for NieR, and we haven't even explained that.
Well, so and here's what I kind of mentioned in the original version, the original game that released here. They wrote it. They wrote his lines. They did Emil dirty. Like, there's no hint that he's gay. There's no way you would know that he's gay. Not a single way. It was confirmed in an interview later, and people and fans of the game were obviously like, "Huh?" Like,
right. Like,
there's absolutely no mention.
Basically the same way I was when you just were like, "Oh, I need a second. Wait, huh?" I could see Delaila in the video. You're like, huh?
I was like, huh?
What?
But then I was thinking about it. I was like, kind of makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, I get it from a character perspective. It makes sense, but I was just like, where was that?
The biggest hint that you get in the original localization is when Emil does get transformed, he says to NieR, and remember, we had Pop in NieR, so this makes it even more awkward. And the thing to keep in mind is Emil isn't like a 12-year-old boy like he looks. He's really 1,000 years old.
Of course, like every other
he's a fucking experiment. Yeah, he's an experiment.
And he's also not a replicant. He's like the most human one out of all of them. Because he was a human that was kind of transformed into a weapon using masa.
He's an X-Man. He's an X-Men.
Yeah, he's an X-Men. But yeah, he gets transformed into his the state that we all know and love, and looking at NieR, he's like, I hate that you're seeing me like this. That's the biggest hint we get in the original localization, that he's gay. I hate that you're seeing me like this.
Yeah,
he's obviously very embarrassed. It's because he has feelings for Papa NieR. Well, yeah, they make it much more obvious in the new script for this version, at the wedding at Facade. Where NieR mentions him getting married, and he hints that he's not interested in a bride, right?
Yeah. NieR says, "Don't worry, you'll find a bride." So basically the conversation starts. Emil is like, "I'm so excited, wedding, I'm almost jealous," and then NieR's like, "Don't worry, you'll find a bride today." And then all of a sudden Emil gets really, it looks like he's almost disappointed. He's like, "Oh," and then NieR walks out, and he's like, "That's not exactly what I meant."
Yeah.
That was kind of the big okay.
Right. And that like I said, that wasn't there at all. That whole conversation was very different in the original localization, and it wasn't clear at all that he was intended to be gay. And I should mention, I'm gonna butcher the exact way Yoko Taro put it. The reason there's so much of this representation in the game is he's just he's like, why wouldn't these people be this way? They're just people, he doesn't see them any which way or the other. That's obviously a massive butchering of what he actually had to say about the LGBT representation he basically has in the game. But it's very much intended to be positive representation, because they shouldn't be looked at and kind of singled out because of that aspect of their character. They're just people,
right?
And they just exist the way that they exist.
You think, I feel like, I'm glad though that it was still pretty subtle, not because I feel like they need to be, but I feel like more often than not, people that create articles, journalists, they tend to conflate these things and make more of a deal out of it than it actually is in the game. And this is why something like The Last of Us, Last of Us Part 2 had so much heat around it, because people created articles about it.
Go listen to
the episode.
Go listen to my glowing remarks on The Last of Us Part 2.
Glowing remarks. Your absolute
my glowing remarks. The shining light that I cast upon that.
Yeah. Let's yeah. No, I think he didn't want to draw attention to it, right? It's part of who they are, but it's not who they are.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the point. But yeah, Emil he's just a joy. He's such a positive character despite having so much shit done to him.
Yeah.
And it's
he reminds me of Vivi, and I mentioned this too. He reminds me of Vivi from Final Fantasy IX, and to a degree, his relationship with NieR is very much like Vivi's relationship with Final Fantasy IX, minus the romantic element.
That's I agree. That's a great assessment.
Something just sparked in my head about Kaine and Emil, though. Remember when you got him out of the manor? She like whispered something in his ear.
Mm-hmm.
Do we ever know what that was? Because he was kind of surprised after. Like, I wonder if she told him like what she is.
I feel like she may. I think that's something left up to interpretation, right?
Yeah.
Like it's definitely something like, and I think that's a big relationship that's super important. Is like how Kaine is much more open and much more. She lets out a little more of that soft side with Emil, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like there's the time where you're scaling the lost shrine and kind of or Emil's talking about how they go camping and how they roast marshmallows sometimes, and kind of has to cut him off and be like, "Yo, shut up! I gotta do the thing. Like, stop it."
Yeah,
she doesn't want NieR to know that, or Weiss to know that, especially.
Yeah. Her little tender side.
And a lot also, and something to note, those cutscenes that you get where like the one where you see Emil and Kaine camping, when you're going back to the village after getting all the pieces, and NieR's telling Weiss, like, I think I'm going to tell Kaine and Emil that I'm doing this myself, and they're like hell you are. Those are entirely new to this game, or to this version of the game.
Oh, okay.
Which is great, because I feel like a big problem with the original release was there wasn't enough relationship building in like any cutscene. It's all done like while you're out adventuring and they're just having idle chatter, right? You never really see any scenes of them bonding or anything. So we're just kind of supposed to accept that they're becoming friends or whatever. And this added in some scenes that makes that a little more obvious, like that scene with Emil and Kaine camping outside, and the one where they're like, and where they tell NieR like, you're not doing this by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
They add in a little more character building that I think is really appreciated.
Yeah.
Anything else to talk about with Emil?
No.
Love him.
Yeah, he's cool. He's dope.
He's great. I guess like we've talked some about Weiss. I feel like Weiss's backstory, again, it's in a short story in Grimoire NieR. It sucks that we don't know more about him.
What is it? I want to know.
From what I know, I don't know much. I didn't actually get a chance to read the entire the whole thing.
Because Weissy's my favorite.
Basically, it's that like him, and that he he used to be human and was kind of transformed into his current form. For Project Gestalt.
Very fairy tale-ish, yeah.
That's kind of why the books have faces, like they're supposed to be the faces of their original human selves, and that's the case with all the grimoires. They were all created, and then I believe Noir specifically was mass produced for the use of the project.
Right.
But yeah, that obviously there's a lot more to it than that. Go look up that.
I really love that aesthetic throughout the entire game. It's a twisted melding of fairy tale and like dark, almost horror. What's cyberpunk? I don't know. It's kind of like that Final Fantasy VII-ish, like steampunk / cyberpunk aesthetic, mixed
like Blade
with
Runner.
Not even Blade Runner so much as like just the twisted horror of like experimenting on children with magic in a way that you would think of in like some sort of dark sci-fi story, like the way you see with like the X-Men, like the Project, like the. Go ahead.
No, it's also a good thing that Delaila brings up Blade Runner, because the use of replicant isn't a coincidence.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to pick a favorite character for me. Like, I love Vice. I love a lot of what he has to say to every character in the game. I love Kaine's backstory. I love Emil's personality. It's really hard to pick. Ironically, the weakest character is probably NieR.
Oh yeah.
Well, he's a player insert for all intents and purposes.
Largely, but he still definitely does have his own personality and character.
Yeah.
But you're not totally wrong. I mean, you have to name him after all, and a lot of that has to more so do with how the creative things that they do with the medium of video games. But you're not entirely off by saying he's a player insert.
Well, he just plays the hero pretty much, and it tries to play the hero, but winds up hurting the people around him without realizing it. Like Kaine and even Yona to an extent. Like the whole time she's like, "Oh, hey NieR, let's hang out." He's like, "Oh, but I gotta go heal you from this disease."
Yeah. I guess let's delve into a few more locations. I think we're done with characters, right? Like, I feel like there's not much more we have to talk about with Devil and Popola.
No.
And like a lot of the other characters, it's interesting that like the number of characters that have names is very, very small. It's mostly like even the guy with the red bag. He's
Red
just
bag
like,
guy.
yeah,
Was
he's
that
just
his
red
name?
bag guy. I think that's what they called him. And like the mailman, the old lighthouse lady is just lighthouse lady. The mailman is just mailman. Like, these are characters that are kind of that kind of tie into the plot, or at least major side quests, and none of them really ever have names.
Yeah, and they look like NPCs, other
Yeah.
NPCs.
What I think the most disappointing one of those is the fisherman at Seafront, because he's got a long quest line, and his quest line's actually great if you see it through to the end. I know we still have yet to talk about side content. I know I'm gonna have to defend the fishing
so much.
I'm gonna have to defend it with my life. But like that guy, it's so disappointing. That guy is like, he's like a really important side quest NPC, and then you turn the corner, walk down the street, and there's another NPC that looks exactly like him. I'm like, really? You guys couldn't give him like his own unique model? Like, his side quest story is great. It's fantastic. We'll delve into that a little later. But locations. We talked a bit about. There's not really much to talk about the village. Seafront is just basically another town. It's really, really, it's like probably the most thriving area you go to, and it's surprising to see that in such a bleak world that this town is like, they're thriving. These people are lively. It's a very bright, colorful place.
Yeah, the people of the area should have gone over there if they weren't so pretentious.
So pretentious and bigoted. Seafront, that like they did add in the Little Mermaid episode, so I guess we could talk a bit about that, because that's pretty big for this version, right?
Yeah, I just kind of wish it would have been in Route B instead of making me pay attention to all the cutscenes and see, well, that specific cutscene. Like, I feel like if they would have threw that in Route B, it would have been just as impactful.
It's a big outlier in many ways, right? Because it's very clearly inserted into this version of the game, because it's the only major area you go to do something for the story that doesn't give you a key for the Shadow Lord's castle.
Right.
So it's really obvious that you're kind of just forced to go there because they added something new. And I almost wish they had added like a sixth piece of the key, just to make a little more sense, or to tie it in a little better. But it is what it is.
I did think it was. I did though think it almost came close to the junkyard in terms of the quality of that story. It was my second favorite, definitely.
I do agree with Delaila that this is the only location story, well, I'll call them. It's the only one that extended past 2 playthroughs, right? It's the only one that had new bits of story in that third route.
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit, but well, I wouldn't even say a little bit because the end of the boss fight completely changes, and it has a completely different resolution.
And you also hear her speak
Yeah,
like English in the
Mhm.
in the third playthrough, whereas the
you
second playthrough you hear like the hissing set, you know. She's talking
yeah
but it's like hissing, you don't.
you get like that full
Oh, that's right.
translation
You
of what
do
she's
hear her
trying.
speak. Yeah.
Yeah, you get that full translation of what she's actually saying. So there's no question. Um,
Well, the
and like
postman was teaching her language.
yeah, but
But I
it's
So
mean,
still
she
ultimately it's still the same. Like you're getting at the same thing at the end of the day. Like
yeah.
ultimately, it's the same tragedy of she didn't want to be what she is, and she thinks she has to eat and she has to kill people and eat them to become human.
to become
It's kind of like there was a similar stuff. Well, I don't want to touch on it because that's spoilers for
okay.
yeah.
Um, I a lot of this comes back to like I really wish they had named some of these other characters, these other NPCs were named because like the mailman is so important to that storyline,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
it's so tragic what happens. You know, he's caring for her, and she loves him and wants to be with him, and
In a
it's
fatherly daughter kind of way, to be
well,
clear.
it's I
Yes.
feel like it's very, very vague, right? Like she has the appearance of a young girl, but who knows if she actually is.
That's
It's
Well,
true.
very, very much a
at the very
disguise almost.
least, at the very least, he thinks of her in a
Correct.
daughterly way.
He wants to take
Yeah.
care of her as like an
Mhm.
adopted daughter for sure. But like the way she's wording it and putting it, like it's love, whether or not it's familial or romantic.
Yeah.
It's still a story of love,
Yeah,
and
because we don't know this ship kind of like that she's on crashes in the second half of the game, but it has like logs of like slaves. Like it's a and we don't know it's never really explained if it's from like ancient history or if this is
yeah.
replicants doing the slaving. We don't really know how where this ship came from,
And
so
I don't know if it's better explained in the novella or if it's just as vague, but you're right, we don't really know much about it, but it does just show up on it gets beached at seafront
so ostensibly she was also a slave, which even makes it more tragic.
potentially. And there's also the bit in the third playthrough where we start getting more you get extra scenes. Again, these weren't in the original release, between Devil and Popola as you're out looking for the pieces of the Shadow Lord's key.
Yes.
And one of the bits is that they were intending to use her name is Luis. They were intending to use her to control the Shadow Lord if they had to. They wanted to
Yeah.
use her as a weapon against him if they had to find a way to control him.
Yeah.
Which isn't really like I feel like that's pretty unnecessary as like a story beat. I feel like it. I think that they were just trying to tie it in further into the
And it's
overall
just
plot.
world building, I
Yeah,
guess. Yeah.
like it didn't really need to be there, but it was there. Um, but yeah, definitely a nice new addition. I wish they had done more to tie it into the overall plot. Like I said, a sixth part of the key that they could have added and made. Um, I guess the problem is they would have had to turn that pentagon into a hexagon, and I guess they didn't want to do that.
You can
Yeah.
create all these cutscenes, voice acting, animation.
Yeah, and
Can't turn a pentagon into a hexagon.
it's kind of sad because I actually did start to get a little attached to Red Bag Guy. They kind of force him down your throat like throughout the game, but I started to get attached to that guy, you know? And it's
Yeah,
again like give him a fucking name, man. Like
Yeah, for
it's,
sure. Him and the wife.
yeah, the relationship, yeah, because it's so real, and again,
did,
the character writing
did you
really
guys
shines.
did you guys do the side quest with them where like they invite you over to dinner?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't
Well,
think I did.
oh man.
I just yeah, I think I meant to, but then the story progressed and I was like,
Okay.
"Oh shit, I forgot
I
to
think
give him the jewel." Right? It was
that's
I got to the jewel point.
okay.
that's the one where you have to get apples, right?
You
Maybe.
have to get a gift
I
for
already
the
don't
wife.
remember. I think that might be a different one. No, I think that might be the same. I don't remember. I genuinely don't. Um, this is what happens. I played the game like 2 months ago.
Oh, many
Yeah.
side quests.
I usually don't do that. I did every side quest. Again, I'm a masochist. I did every single one.
I did, again, like I said at the beginning, I did like 60%, and I felt so over. Which it wasn't even that much. I think it's just because so many of them
are fetch
quests that are, and not just any fetch quests that are based on.
There, and that's kind of a big problem I have with the game overall from a 100% perspective, is the RNG is really bad.
Yeah.
Or I wouldn't say bad, unfair. It doesn't really. I'm used to grinding in JRPGs, man. I don't really have a problem with grinding in JRPGs. This game really fucking makes you grind, especially when it like has certain. It has like certain weather system with certain enemies that only spawn under those weather conditions, and there's very, very small chances of things dropping. And when you need to do those for a lot of side quests, you know, how many titanium alloys do you need? Memory alloys do you need for side quests plus weapon upgrading? It's just, it's really exhausting.
Yeah, extremely.
But anyway, I think the last big location that I kind of want to talk about is the manor. We could talk about the Lost Shrine. I feel like there's not really much to talk about. It's just like a vertical dungeon.
Yeah.
With like
you
rooms.
just go there like a ton. It's probably the place you go the most aside from your village.
Yeah, and the Baron
like, that you're forced to go to, I'd say, yeah. What was that?
Kind of like the Baron Temple too. It's just like a temple with like rules, and you have to like not jump certain combat sequences or
that's one
not
that
use
we
magic.
That's one that we could actually talk about all on its own, like aside from facade, Jesus. Because I really liked the Baron Temple. I think that they needed to go further with the limitations in a lot of those rooms because you could break a lot of them really easily. Like there's ones that are like, oh, you have to get across to the other side and there's lots of bullets. You can't run. It's like, okay, but I can jump. And so you can just jump on the boxes and run along the side and then get to the end without having to do any effort. I don't know if that was intentional, if that was just a total
I'm pretty sure it was intentional,
like misstep on the designers, but like yeah, you could just break so many of those rooms, and I feel like once you realize that, they're not really challenging anymore. Yeah, I don't know if if it was intentional or not, but it's interesting.
Yeah, they just I think they were just trying to make a point that like you know, this place runs by rules. There's rules for everything, including the temple that you have to go to save the prince.
Yeah, and it also could have been like intentional in the sense of we have these rules, not all of them are meaningful. Because, you know, even though this rule is in place, there's plenty of other easier ways to get through it.
Right, like Fira. Like Fira is not. I don't think she was. No, she wasn't mute, but there was a rule that said she couldn't speak for some reason.
No, I think she was mute, and like while she
speaks later in the game
when she's dying.
Right.
Yeah. I think the dying thing kind of let her say, "Okay, maybe I can speak up real quick." I don't think there was a rule that prevented her from speaking.
I thought that there was. I don't know. Well, it doesn't matter.
I don't believe so. I know that the attack that happened when she was younger left her face disfigured, and that's why, like, facade was like a perfect place for her because she always wanted to hide her face anyway.
Oh, okay.
But I think the fact that she was mute might have been a result of that attack as well.
Maybe.
And being on her deathbed was like, that's why she spoke.
Well, and not only that, but the prince wanted to pay NieR back for rescuing him with her. And NieR was like, here, this is what you can do for me. But create a rule where if a rule doesn't make sense, you can like create another rule to like make it irrelevant or like take away rules.
If there was a rule that prevented her, maybe if there was a rule that prevented her from talking, then I'm misremembering that. Maybe they voted it out. So
yeah. But anyway.
But yeah, back to the manor. I want to talk about the manor because the manor is like two incredible references in one. Right? You go into that manor and what the hell does it remind you of?
Resident Evil.
Yeah, a horror game.
Oh my god. It's got fixed camera angles. I mean they swoop when you move through, but it's very clearly Resident Evil inspired.
Yeah.
And then you go into the basement in the facility, and we get another one of them genre bends.
Yep, it's like top down.
That was one of my favorite parts of the game. Yeah,
it becomes a fucking Diablo dungeon crawler.
Yeah,
except you're killing a bunch of children.
Experiments and yeah, kids and
X-Mans.
Failed X-Mans.
You're killing a bunch of mutants, basically. But yeah, I really, the manor was like one of my favorite locations in the game because of the clear references it was trying to make to other genres and franchises. I really appreciated it.
Yeah, even some like, well, this probably came out later, but like Layers of Fear when you're walking by the paintings again and they're like all demonic and shit.
Mm-hmm.
The paintings that are on the wall. Did you guys remember that? They're like when you walk past them, it's just like some weird looking people, but then you walk past again and they have like horns.
Yeah. I didn't play Layers of Fear, but that did happen. Like there was a pretty clear that happened in the game or in NieR.
Yeah.
When paintings changed. Yeah, I really liked that area.
Me too.
The music. Yeah, and I almost wish you went back more. I would trade a lot of backtracking to other places in latter playthroughs to go back and find like more layers to the mansion.
I also wish they went a little further with like you wind up having to get some keys to open some rooms to progress. I wish they had gone a little further to make it a little more labyrinthine, so that you would have had to like you could open shortcuts and stuff, because it did whenever time you go back and wanted to go into the basement or whatnot to do some grinding, it'd be kind of a long trek to get to that entrance. And I wish they would have like made it so you could find some keys to open some shortcuts and really leaned into that Resident Evil reference that they were
for sure. Cut out the Junk Heap a lot. You know,
yes,
I was so sick of that place.
Fuck the Junk Heap.
And that's where you have to, if like for Delaila knows for sure, like that's where you have to go to do so much grinding because of all the
I know. I did a bunch of side quests
even for the side quests. Yep.
Okay, fair enough. All right, we got to get to our last few points to talk about here. Any other? Did I miss any genre bending sections? I feel like we covered all the.
No, I think that's it.
Yeah. What did you guys think of the combat for this new iteration? Obviously, you don't have the reference point to the original iteration of it, but what did you guys think of this?
It's so weird to get used to the combat being a lot more directional and you having to actually lock onto your targets and B, having to dodge directionally, because if you remember in Automata, you hit the dodge button, you dodge.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter what direction it is. Same with block. And when you attack, whoever you're playing as, to be whatever it is, will kind of automatically go in the direction. There's still like a lock-on function targets, but the combat was just so much more fluid. Whereas here you can definitely feel jank, especially because it's directional. So you have to block directionally where the attack is coming from. You have to dodge directionally. There's like weird shift arounds. And because you're constantly being swarmed and the camera doesn't get a very good picture of what the entire battle looks like, it just didn't feel that great. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. What did you guys
I agree.
think?
Definitely more slower pace and janky than NieR Automata, of course. But I could definitely see, like, just based on what I've seen of the original NieR, it's definitely better than what it was, like by a lot. And I do like, though, that the extra elements to the combat were more simplistic than NieR Automata, because I felt like I was able to play more with like weapons and play more, like I was switching my weapons a lot more and I was switching my magic a lot more, because it was more simple, where I feel like I was kind of overwhelmed with all of the items. And
the UI system in this game is very good.
Yes.
Because the D-pad is entirely all linked to using your items or switching your weapons, and you can actually change it so that when you press the button on the D-pad to go to like your spears or whatever, and instead of pressing it and it brings you the list, you press it to immediately switch to the last weapon that you had equipped in that slot, so to speak. So you can really get some interesting weapon combos going and quick switching just by a press of a button. It's really, they really made the combat in this version of the game super deep, whereas it was really simple and really boring in the original release. It had some cool things going for it, but they were just made better by this version.
Yeah. I mean,
I
the
really like.
combat. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I like it. I like it less than Automata. But I feel like it still got boring after a while.
Okay. Um.
But to be fair, I didn't know about that combo switching weapon combo. I knew about that in NieR Automata, but not this game. So
I
that's
found
pretty
out
interesting.
I found out about it from a video that of this guy giving like combat tips, and I didn't realize you could switch it. So because normally when you press it, it brings up the list, and you can change it so that pressing it um quick switches and holding it brings up the list, where it's vice versa by default. I feel like that shouldn't have been the default.
Yeah.
Um, but and then what going to switch out like magic slots and whatnot is super fluid. It's quick, it's easy, and the aesthetic is very fitting for the fact that like you're using Grimoire Vice as like a companion, but he's also a book. So like going into your quest log, like that's where you change out your words that you collect. How'd you guys feel about the word system?
I like that you can equip the best one. It wasn't until I was farming that I equipped the words that helped with better loot drops.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I thought it was an alright progress system. I mean, again, we keep comparing, even though we said we wouldn't. I liked NieR system better, but they're very different. They do very different things. I enjoyed the word collection system, but like ultimately, like it really wasn't that different than like say if you leveled up and had like skill points or unlocked some sort of skill tree. Like you were just collecting. I think really all its story purpose, a thematic purpose, going back to language and culture and perspective.
Yeah.
Um,
And I liked how you heard the words as you killed these enemies. That was like something that intrigued me in the beginning. I was like, why are they saying things as I kill them, you know?
right.
I think I love it and I hate it, right? It allows for a lot of customization, and like you can really go deep and like make this weapon's gonna be like my poison weapon. This weapon's gonna be like the one that does the most damage. This one's gonna be my armor breaker, so on and so forth. You can really go deep with the customization. It all though comes back to the same criticism that I had about NieR Automata. It stands here. I hate how weapons are treated in these games. It's my biggest pet peeve. It's the biggest flaw in my opinion, is that you get like 10, 12 small swords, right? And eventually you're only ever going to use the one that's strongest. And this
Yeah.
this doesn't even have.
Not even the sword, the spear, the phoenix spear.
Yeah, I mean, and in this case, it's like you're only ever going to use the one that's strongest, or the one that you like, the type of weapon that you like the move set most, and then you're going to use the strongest one, and you put their best words on there. The words don't offer enough difference in like
Yeah, I
what you're
never
doing in combat.
I never used like the poison ones. It was always just
Yeah,
more damage,
Hmm.
more lowering the MP
yeah.
costs and
And
all that stuff.
it might be a little different if like you play on hard difficulty, but like even then
Yeah.
I don't see them making much of a difference. I feel like the big problem with weapons is they give you a lot of weapons and none of them really feel unique. And if they ever do feel unique, it's like way too late in the game. It's the biggest issue I have. This game, the both of these games, and from what I understand, even Drakengard does this. It just throws a lot of weapons at you, and none of them really feel special. And I feel
Yeah.
like that's really disappointing.
Hmm.
Um,
Agreed.
Especially because they treat weapons as an important thing. I mean, obviously in this game, you need all of them in order to fucking fully beat it. So I just wish I really hope for like the next major NieR game, weapons are treated a little better.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Uh,
depends. I guess it depends on how you look at it, because honestly, that's not an uncommon thing in JRPGs.
yeah. I
Um,
mean, a lot of JRPGs have like they have like over time, like the weapons will progress, and like eventually your starting broadsword is going to be obsolete compared to the save the queen. And this one keeps them a lot closer together, right? Like there's not a huge difference between like if you fully upgrade all your weapons, there's not like a huge difference between the weakest sword and the best sword. And
it's really the combat speed, like the way the combo.
And they do kind of try to change it up a bit by having like some of them have weight, which is a negligible difference, by the way. Some of them have like different weights to them. Some of them have different bonuses to magic power. It really just doesn't do enough.
No.
And I think it's a major issue I have with the combat overall.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this version's combat is so much better than the original version,
I
guys.
bet.
It's ridiculous. All right, here we go. This is like one of the last things we have to talk about. Delaila looks so excited to fight me on this.
Fishing?
I really like the fishing. I think it's simple enough. It's not like too deep, no pun intended. Like there's a manageable amount of fish you can go catch. The side quest line for the fisherman is fantastic.
Yes.
And like it's so good. By the end of it, I like for those of you that might not have done it because you probably hated the fishing just like Delaila did. There's this fisherman in Seafront that's like eager to teach you all of his fishing secrets, and you find out after you finish the last quest, and this goes on both in part 1 and 2.
It's the only side quest that continues.
Yeah, and after you finish the last one and you catch this legendary fish, you go back, you find out that he was sick and passed away, and that no one in the town really liked him because he was a war vet that did like some horrible things in the war, so no one really liked him. But you were an out-of-towner, totally free of that knowledge, and he finally felt like he had a friend and someone he could pass on all his fishing knowledge to.
Yeah.
It's really sad.
Yeah, it is. I mean, every side quest that's substantial is sad. But
so good.
Yeah, no, the story was fine for the side quest. It was just the fishing mechanic. Like, okay, fine, catching a sardine's fine because I just use my lure and that's it. That like I just got to go to a certain body of water. But then when you get to more sophisticated fish like the sandfish, where you got to go to the desert on either side of the desert ocean, and you have to make sure you pull the lure up just a second after you put it in, because if you wait one more second, the fish goes away. And I only knew that because I looked it up. Like, there's so many fishing mechanics that, like, all right, first of all, it doesn't control well, especially coming off of a great fishing mechanic like Far Cry 5 or even Final Fantasy 15. Those are great. They remind me of when I go fishing, and I like fishing in real life. So there's some merit to what I'm saying. But this game, it's just so janky. Like, that's not how fishing feels. And then adding the layer of it that I hated is that in order to figure out how to find these fish, I had to look at a guide because the game does not tell you how to do it.
Well, you know, if you get a PlayStation 5, you get some haptic feedback in those controllers. So I feel like fishing.
To be fair though, that first of all, since it's still a PS4 game, it doesn't add any of those.
No, I know. Yes, I'm being facetious.
That's fine. There is some truth to that. I actually stopped using visual cues and eventually only used like the vibration of the controller when it was at its most intense, when I was pulling the stick in that direction. That's what informed me most of whether or not I was successful.
It didn't work for me. I tried that.
Hey, that's fine. Like it didn't always work, right? Sometimes it was finicky. The fishing definitely wasn't perfect. I just definitely liked it.
Well, what did you like about it?
The fact that it wasn't too much, right? Like if it was more fish than it actually was.
It was definitely simple, but I agree with Delaila. Like I didn't even go through this whole quest line. Like I just did like a few steps of it. And I agree with both of you in the sense. I agree with Mark in that it's the basics of it are simple, but I agree with Delaila in that like I was following those simple mechanics as they were forth for me in the game, and then I would have to catch a fish, and like all of a sudden the mechanics weren't working, and it felt like the game was broken. And then I would look online. It's like, oh, well, it would have been nice if I'd known that.
Yeah. It does kind of expect it doesn't kind of expect a lot of the player to kind of learn these things themselves. And I do agree that like for certain fish trying to find them, like you have absolutely no way of finding. It's not like an old RPG or adventure game where like you could talk to someone and get a hint or something. Like this game doesn't really do that. You kind of just have to go to different fishing spots and hope for the best. So I agree on that sentiment. I will say that I think that the mini game got harder with this new iteration and a little less obvious on when you had to pull back on the rod. There were some times where things that I remembered from the PS3 version didn't translate over to the PS4 version. I feel like they made it a little harder and a little more obtuse, and that's probably why you guys got that. That's your only experience and got really soured on it.
Okay. Same with the gardening, though. I didn't know. I mean, I had to get the white moonflower.
I didn't even fuck with that.
Gardening is a whole other shit show.
Dude, I got all these seeds, and I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna plant some pumpkins and some wheat and some corn."
I know.
I planted it, and I came back to my game, and I was like, "They're fucking dead. Why? I just planted them like right before I signed off."
And that's the thing. I think I told you this in our Slack channel. I was because I was watching your stream, and I mentioned like, you might want to get started on cultivation, but I didn't really tell you much more than that. And I felt bad because like the game doesn't really tell you anything about about any of it. It doesn't tell you anything about the mechanics. And I could have told you, I would have taken up your entire chat for about 10 minutes, and I did not want to do that.
You could have told us, but
instead, I wasted time planting things incorrectly.
I'm sorry.
And having to spend, I mean, I would have to log on at 3 a.m. like, holy shit, I'm like, moonflower's dead. I don't want them to die.
And that's so depressing when you come to like a whole crop of dead shit. Well, and that's why I was just like, I'm not fucking with this.
I'm like, I gotta go to a freaking barbecue the next day. I'm like, wait, I gotta make sure I check my freaking garden before I go to the barbecue.
It's like, I got work. I gotta walk the dog. Like, am I supposed to tell my dog? Am I supposed to tell my dog he's gotta hold his shit in so I can go check on my moonflower?
Like, there were so many times where like Katie and I, it would be like 10:30 at night. We'd be ready for bed, and I'm like, fuck, hold on. I gotta log in and check my plants.
Jesus Christ! There's so many jokes I can make with that right now.
There was so many times I had to do that. And yeah, I feel like they could have done something, because the way the cultivation works and growing things works, it all runs on the system clock, right? So if you plant stuff at 8 p.m. and you don't play the game for like 2 days, it's not basing that off of your save file. It's basing it off of, it's checking the system clock, realizing, oh, you planted the shit 2 days ago? Yeah, it's dead. And so you really have to be diligent on checking that stuff.
They each grow differently. They each have their own cycles. It's not like moonflowers will take longer to wilt, but you have to harvest them before.
Well, the thing is, you want them to die because you want them to turn into seeds.
But you don't want them to die too much. So if you pumpkins will take a certain amount of days. The moonflower will it'll grow. You'll have 24 hours for it to grow, and then you have 24 hours to pick it to get seeds. But then in 48 hours, you're done with the seeds, and you could just discard them. It's insane. I can't believe I did that.
Again, we live in an age where they're like the internet is at your disposal, right? And I did go into this with a guide, with some knowledge, understanding like what I had to do. Like not fully. I did learn a lot myself, but like it still was like going into it, it wasn't too stressful. Yeah. And I still felt like it was super rewarding, like getting a lunar tier, like because I was able to grow it, like that was super satisfying. And like it got to the point where since I started so early on the PS4 version, by the end of it I had a whole field of lunar tiers. Awesome.
I did too, and then I wound up going into ending E, and then they were all just gone. But anyway, it's okay because that's the thing about the lunar tiers too. You can only grow them if you crossbreed. So you have to crossbreed moonflowers to then crossbreed more moonflowers to get the white moonflower.
I think what I love about the cultivation system is like pretty much the antithesis of what I liked about the fishing system. It's the depth it is the depth of the cultivation system that I love about it. There's like they didn't have to put in this whole ass like farming mini game in the game, but they fucking did, and they put a lot of thought into it, and
They did.
it was just great. I loved it.
Yeah, I almost wish you could have.
They didn't have to put Blitzball in the Final Fantasy X.
Hey, but I will always be thankful that they fucking did, Jason, because I love Blitzball. Hell yes. Bet you didn't hear that one. See that one coming. I guess to wrap this up before we get to the final question, any other side quests or side quest lines that really stuck out to you guys?
Oh yeah, the one where an old man can't find his dog, and
How did I
then
know that was the one you were gonna bring up?
because you were on my stream, I think.
Oh, maybe I was. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also just know you. I figured you were gonna bring up the one about
I
the pet.
dogs, man. Any animal dying in a game, like, it kind of could get petrified. Like, Emil could sacrifice himself, but the one that got me the most was the dog.
Yeah.
But it was more heartfelt because when you find the dog, you're like, yeah, it's dead, but then you see that it was getting like medicine for the old man because he was sick, and then when you go back to tell the old man the news, which I was dreading, the old man also died. So it's like they both.
I also liked one of the mandatory side quests you have to do to get a weapon. If I remember correctly, it's the one where you get it from the vendor, the guy who sells weapons, in NieR's village, and you end up finding like jack shit. It's like junk, and then his wife's like, oh, why don't you treasure or look over here for something, or like a bunch of.
I remember that
better. It wasn't like, and the quest ends up culminating by chance. You end up finding a weapon.
Yeah.
But I just remember that one moment where like the wife is just like, man, you know what? Just give me a bunch of money so my husband feels better.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was funny.
I feel like I had a. Oh, I mean, I really liked the
Devil Up Popola singing.
Well, yeah, that was a great side quest. It's kind of weird that you had to go make a drink out of mouse tails and fuck the other ingredient.
Yeah,
another strange
lizard
tails. It was lizard tails and mouse tails. Yes, thank you. You had to bring those and even the seafront bartender was like, I know it's weird, trust me.
Yeah.
But that was a good one. I really liked the log lady. Jesus, I got Twin Peaks on the mind. I really liked the lighthouse lady side quest line, because that was largely a side quest line, and that was really great. And it even continued into part 2, where an ancestor of her lover came looking for the jewel, and like you had like 3 different choices. Like you could keep you when you found the jewel, you could return it to her, you could throw it away, or you could just keep it and sell it for yourself. And
that also kind of played into Louise, because the song that she's being when she starts singing with the red bag man. He didn't have a name. Or not the red bag man. It's the post office man, the mailman. He mentions how it's like a song that used to be sung by the lady in the tower.
Yeah, it's a side quest line that's kind of important to Seafront's backstory, because they all spent all this time lying to her about her lover still being alive, and really had died all that time ago. It's really what gives that town, it kind of plays into how it's a very bright, like seemingly thriving place. And you find out, it's really got a dark secret, and finding out that dark secret's really, it really adds to it a lot.
Yeah. Also, the old lady smuggling supplies.
Oh, that was a good one too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you turn her in, or did you?
No. I let her have her hustle.
Delaila ain't no snitch.
No. Because she gave you like some cool stuff after, I think.
So like I turned her in because like what you could get was you got less money and you got a discount from the item store in town. And I'm like, I don't really buy anything from that item store, and
Oh.
I would always have to go to that item store if I wanted to get that discount. So I'm like, yeah, fuck it, I'll take the more money and turn her in. Like, fuck her, she's smuggling some illegal ass shit, drugs and contraband. Absolutely not in my seafront. Jason, you got anything to add?
No, I think that was pretty much it for side quests. I don't really remember anything else
Yeah.
because
So,
there were so many that were just kind of fetch quests.
yeah. I mean, I guess, is there anything else you guys want to talk about before we go to the final question?
Just
We gotta wrap this up.
yeah, just I don't think we. I don't. This is real quick. I don't, just like it was in Automata.
Wait, sorry, Jay, you cut out there. Can you
Oh,
repeat that?
sorry. I said music is awesome, just like it was in Automata.
Yeah, it
Oh
is.
my god. See, that's
Um,
the
Go ahead,
thing.
Delilah.
I love the music so much, so much. Almost sometimes more than Automata.
Mhm.
But I got so tired of it after a while because I kept having to go to the same places over and over again.
So did Katie. She was ready for me, especially since I played through this game in its entirety twice. She was
Yeah.
so ready for me to be done and move on because she
Yeah.
was so sick of hearing the da 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 da.
Oh god, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
Automata definitely uses leitmotif better, but
what
the music here was still good.
what I'll say is, like, while Automata's soundtrack was definitely more consistently good, Replicant has some of the best singular tracks in the entire series.
Yeah. I agree.
Kaine's theme, Emil's theme, and the Song of the Ancients, all three of those could rival so many songs on Automata soundtrack.
Mm.
I really like the Baron Temple song too. I mean,
Yeah,
honestly, all of them, but
the whole thing. I mean, the music of the series. There has yet to be like a bad song, right?
and it's the same person, the same composer, right? Keiichi?
Same composer. Emmy Evans is more focused in this game soundtrack than she was in Automata. They had
Mm.
a lot of other vocalists come in for that soundtrack, but this is very much starring Emmy Evans as the vocalist.
Yeah.
And she's the one that, like, basically created that language that's used in the soundtrack,
Yeah.
which is even more impressive. So
Yeah. And
yeah.
you guys said at the beginning that you think people should play this game first and then Automata second.
Yes. If anything, what I'd say is play, if God forbid, if you got this far and you haven't played either of these fucking games, I would say play through and complete ending D of this game, and then play Automata and get all endings, and then go
Interesting
back and do
approach.
ending E.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
would
that makes
actually
sense.
flip that now that you're switching it up like that. I would say play Route A of Automata and then go back to Replicant, beat it, and then do what you said.
Oh, okay.
Because I feel like the simplicity and the redundancy of NieR Replicant could kind of turn people off to just the
Yeah.
series period. I feel like Automata like has so much going for it that it kind of reels you in and makes you want to get more context,
I
you
mean,
know?
I think the thing about Replicant, and I do think it achieves this, right, is that the story is so good and it does get you so emotionally attached that you do want to see it through in spite of it all, right?
Yeah.
Like, in spite of the fact that you have to do that second half so many times, like, you want to see what happens because you
It's the
care.
characters, yeah.
It's the characters.
That's true.
You care so much about them that you want to know what happens
I
next.
got because I just realized I haven't used a Star Wars. I was Star Wars reference. It's a lot like Empire. Empire, like almost nothing happens in that movie, plot wise. It's all about the characters.
Yeah. That's fair. That's a fair assessment.
Mm.
Um yeah, I guess ready to move on to the final question.
Mhm.
Okay. You think we'll ever you think Drakengard's gonna get attention soon? Because, like, we spent so much time talking about how, we really needed to know a lot about Drakengard ending E to know what was going on here. NieR is now becoming super popular, right? Automata was like
I don't
skyrocketed the series into popularity, and Replicant only assisted with that because there was a lot of demand for it. So do you think now, with Replicant being popular and a lot of people still being confused, you think Drakengard's going to get some attention?
I say no for two reasons. A, for the reason you just said, that they're becoming very popular now, kind of similar to Persona in a way, um,
Good point.
where they're kind of becoming a bit more mainstream. And I think they want to build on that, and to go to Drakengard would almost kind of be like going. It wouldn't even be like revisiting an old IP, trying to break in with a new IP because so many people don't know it. On top of that, trying to do a remake of the original Drakengard, um, the original Drakengard is really fucked up, like even more so than these games. I don't know if they would want to take that chance. I mean, not that audiences wouldn't handle it, but like it was kind of a controversy when it came out. I don't know if you guys either you remember it, but
A little bit, yeah. I definitely see what you're saying and
there
agree.
there was like incest in that. Like there was
Yeah.
some really, you
Oh,
know,
it had a ton of dark themes. It was a
this
very
was
mature
way
game.
this was way before like things like Game of Thrones. Like I don't want incest is mainstream, but like you understand what I'm saying. It was more palatable to mass audiences.
Yeah. Um, Delilah, what do you think?
I would only want it for story context. But I guess I've been getting that from YouTube videos.
Good point,
I
yeah.
hear that the
You'll need
combat's not that great.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the problem, right? Is they probably can't just do a remaster, right? They'd have to do what they did
A
with the
full remake.
yeah.
Well,
Like
so when they were making Drakengard, it originally was just supposed to be the Dragon section, but Dynasty Warriors was becoming popular at the time, so they added like a really shitty Muso ground combat sections to it.
yeah. And like theoretically they could do what they did with Replicant and they just overhaul the combat, right? And kind of change that around so that it's a little more palatable and a little more fun. Um but yeah, I think it's necessary, but I don't know if we will unless they totally rebrand the series, right? Unless they rebrand it and change the name to be like or really hammer in with the marketing that it's like the series that led to NieR. That's really what they'd have. I mean, kind of like how they did with NieR Replicant. This version, they're calling it the prequel to Automata because they're really trying to they were really trying to um tap into the popularity of that game. Uh,
Yeah.
and
I
like
also wonder what the legal situation is regarding Drakengard,
why?
as in because like there ended up being a third one, but I don't was that a Square game?
The first two were published, by all three of them were published by Square. The only one that wasn't published by Square in North America, I believe, was two, which was published by Ubisoft, which is
Okay,
so
yeah.
strange.
No, yeah. All I meant was I don't know who has the publishing.
I think Square
Yeah.
Enix does have. I mean, I'm no, I'm like 99% sure
Okay.
that Square
Yeah,
has
I have
Square
I
has
have
the
no
IP.
idea.
Yeah,
But again, NieR has the recognizable name.
yeah.
You might be
So
right. Even if they did like redo it, like they would probably somehow try to like NieR colon Drakengard or something like that.
mhm. But alrighty, we got to wrap.
Wait, here's
What's
a
up?
really quick, because I know we have to go.
Yeah.
What do you think they're tying in with Near Reincarnation, a mobile game that is releasing soon or released?
It's I mean it's just another it's a gotcha game, right? It has like some sort of original plot, but it still is just very gotcha with
Mm.
they're bringing in NieR recognizable NieR thing. To be fair, it's not even like the first time it's really happened. There's another gotcha game that was heavily worked on and produced and designed by Yoko Taro called Sinnoh Alice.
Mm.
I played it a lot. There's
Hmm.
actually a lot of like NieR subplot stuff that happens in that game, like backstory stuff from like the NieR tie-ins that they've had, and like there's weapon. Oh, and that's another thing we didn't even talk about. They added in weapon stories in this version of the game to like, the same thing that it had an Automata. As you upgrade a weapon, it has like a story tied to it, and you can read those. Sinoalis had that too with like the NieR crossover weapons and stuff, and it's probably just gonna be shit like that.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to Reincarnation because I always look forward to a gacha game in a franchise that I like. I hope it has staying power with me because a lot of gacha games I fall off of in about a month or two because they just become too much work.
Okay.
Can you really call them gacha games then? Because they didn't gacha. It's awful. I'm sorry.
Anyway, Jason,
as soon as we're done, yeah.
One more awful thing that we need from you is the Kwasnicki rating.
Kwasnicki rating. So remember, folks, scale of 1 to 10, 5 being average. 7.5.
7.5. All right.
7.5 what though?
Oh yeah, 7.5 what?
Oh man. God.
Oh man.
I don't know. 7.5 Emil heads. I don't know.
I was about to say 7.5 Emil heads. Let's go. All right. Cool. Delaila, what are you working on?
Just been releasing Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. NieR Replicant just ended today, ending E.
I saw that
on YouTube, which was nice timing. And Ratchet and Clank will be probably ending this week. And then also Returnal stuff is coming because my ass just beat the second boss today, and I feel proud about it.
Congratulations!
Thank you.
Man, that game is tough.
Yeah, I love it.
Really tough. I loved it too. I didn't expect it to be on my like shortlist for Game of the Year. It definitely is now that I finished
Mine
it.
too.
But yeah,
congrats
on that.
Yeah, thanks. I'm streaming just Returnal now, 11 a.m. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, but I might switch it to like Monday, Wednesday, or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'll keep you guys updated on socials, but just Returnal on stream.
Stay tuned to @Assassina_San on Twitter.
Yes.
For those juicy deets. Jason, you working on anything?
Just writing, not on tweets or anything like that. Just writing, playing games, grinding out Final Fantasy 14 right now. But otherwise, I'm pretty good.
And maybe I'll get a little tease. Maybe something else in the works for the future. Maybe the
maybe.
Not NieR like this NieR. Like I guess that was a bad tease. Yeah, maybe we'll maybe have more news on that sometime soon.
Yeah, Mark and I might got a little ditty coming y'all way.
Yeah, working a little bit on that. I still have a personal project that I'm trying to like get motivation to work on. I've been teasing that for like 4 episodes now. I really got to get my ass in gear. And that's about it. You can follow me on Twitter @Nibelheimy, and you can follow Delaila on Twitter @Assassina_San. You can follow Jason on Twitter @SolidClaws, but don't follow him. He doesn't do anything. And yeah, you can follow Dead Cell Media @Dead Cell Media. We have some Facebook group. You can join that. I'm not in there, but Delaila is. Like, whatever.
Post.
I really more so I'm on Twitter like pretty often, regrettably, but like I really encourage you, like, follow me on Twitter, @me, talk to me. Like, I would love that so much. If you listen on YouTube, like and subscribe and comment what's your favorite NieR character. What do you think of the weapons? I don't care. To comment, we love it. We love it. We love it. We love it. Thumbs up, preferably. If you listen to this on Apple Podcasts, 5 stars preferred, rate and review. That would be great. Really, really can't tell you how much it means to me and to really all of us if you listen and give us feedback and rate and review. And
I will bestow
Terrence, my homie Terrence, shout outs.
Oh yeah, Terrence.
He was really looking forward to this episode.
My blessings upon you, Terrence. As you can see, I am a holy figure. God's I am a figurative recoming of Jesus, so I hope people can actually see this beam of light, or else all these comments are gonna like be nonsensical.
Well, no one on podcast services will, so that's good.
Oh, that's true. I didn't. Fuck. Oh, shit.
Delaila, what is our next game? What's the next game that we're covering
on
this show?
Zelda Skyward Sword. We're gonna be playing the HD.
Yeah, I assume it's not going to be that different from the original Wii version. So if you want to break out your Wii and play full on with those motion controls, we are covering The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. A first for Reap the Spoils, a Nintendo game.
I'm looking forward to hearing Zelda's Lullaby played backwards over and over again.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. This is going to be a fun one. So hope to see you next month. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye-bye now, everybody.